Section 1 of the Art or Craft of Rhetoric. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Amelia Chesley. The Art or Craft of Rhetoric by Leonard COX. A reprint, edited with an introduction, notes, and glossarial index by Frederic Ives Carpenter, Ph.D. Chicago, The University of Chicago Press, 1899. Preface. The object of this number of the English Studies of the University of Chicago is to make accessible, in a literal reprint, the first rhetoric printed in the English language. The work here reproduced is one of the earliest English school books, and is significant for the history of English prose in the first half of the 16th century. It is, moreover, a work connected in many interesting ways with the humanistic movement and the revival of learning in England, and with Erasmus, Melanchthon, and their associates. In the introduction, I have endeavored to arrange and present all the important material available for the elucidation of the life and work of Cox, himself one of this circle. Much of this material apparently has been hitherto overlooked or insufficiently considered, but I have studied to present it without comment so far as possible. I regret that several points still remain in doubt, and that I have been unable to discover and consult several works ascribed to Cox and here listed in the bibliography of his works. The Digest of Melanchthon, Cox's principal source, by Mausollanus, is here given, inasmuch as the correspondence between the works of Cox and Melanchthon is so close that this digest serves equally well as an analytic table of contents for Cox. Later on, the source in full in Melanchthon, so far as used by Cox, also is reprinted. The reprint of Cox's own text follows the undated first edition, A, of circa 1530, usually assigned by bibliographers to 1524. Corrections and variant readings from the edition of 1532, B, are noted at the foot of the page, but a few corrections in punctuation introduced in B have been silently adopted. Contractions have been generally expanded, and in all cases are indicated by italics. I desire to express my especial obligations to Professor W. D. McClintock of the University of Chicago, who first suggested the present reprint. I am indebted for suggestions or for assistance received also to the authorities of the Library of the British Museum, and especially to Messrs. A. W. Pollard, R. Proctor, and Richard Garnett, to Mr. Henry R. Plomer, London, to Professor R. M. Werner of the University of Lemberg, to Professor C. H. Moore of Harvard University, and to Professors Paul Shorey and J. M. Manley and Dr. Carl Peach of the University of Chicago. Frederic Ives Carpenter, University of Chicago, January 1899. End of section 1. Section 2 of the Art or Craft of Rhetoric. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Amelia Chesley. The Art or Craft of Rhetoric by Leonard COX. The author and his career. Cox himself, scholar, schoolmaster, and preacher in the reigns of Henry VIII and Edward VI, so far as we can construct the story of his career from the confused and defective materials at our command, although playing a minor part, seems to have led a life typical of the times and interesting in its vicissitudes. Educated at both universities, traveling abroad and teaching in 3 or 4 of the foreign universities, translating from Erasmus, Melanchthon, and others, writing learned scholia and commentaries, Cox came into touch in one way or another with most of the great men of letters and of learning in his age, and counted among his friends such men as Erasmus, Melanchthon, Leland, Palsgrave, Bale, Farringdon, Toy the printer, and John Hales. He was in public employment, patronized by Cromwell, and pensioned off in a small way among the other beneficiaries from the spoliation of the ancient religious foundations, and so finally became a preacher of the reformed religion under Edward VI, and teacher in the grammar schools at Reading, and perhaps at Caerleon and Coventry. Cox thus witnessed and took his share in the 2 great movements of the first half of the century in England, that of the early humanism, whose chief representatives were Erasmus and Colet, and that of the religious Reformation, which at first was so intimately associated with the movement of humanism. Concerning the date of Cox's birth, we know nothing. It must be placed before the opening of the 16th century, for as early as 1518 we find the learning of Cox already so well established as to secure for him the honor of delivering a Latin oration at Cracow in Poland. It is probable that by this date Cox was teaching in the academy at Cracow, where at any rate in 1524 we find him entered as full master. Between these dates, however, he had travelled elsewhere and had been concerned with other matters, for in 1519 we find the following entry concerning him among the accounts at Tournai. Memorandum: a horse and money given to Leonard COX to convey stuff from Tournai to Antwerp. Money given to Leonard COX, Shurland the jester and gunner, and to Matthew's brother at his going to school at Paris. The next definite date in the life of Cox which I can discover is the publication in 1524 of his Scholia in Latin on the Latin poem on hunting by the Cardinal Adrian. This work is dedicated by Cox to Iodoco Ludovico Dedo, Serenissimo ac Potentissimo Regi Polonae a Secretis, Moicenati suo SDP, and the dedication is dated ex gymnasio nostro Casoviae. Quator calendas Mei anno a Natali Servatoris quindecim viginti quator. The work was published at Cracow in June of the same year. On the title page the poem is described as accompanied with Scholiis non interuditis Leonardi COXi Britanni. All these references can hardly apply to a young man less than 24 years of age. Cox is said to have been the second son of Lawrence Cox of the city of Monmouth in Monmouthshire by Elizabeth Welly, his wife, and the grandson of John Cox. Of his education before entering college we know nothing beyond Bayle's general statement that from his very childhood he was well instructed in liberal studies, nor do we know the date of his entering or of his receiving his degree at Cambridge, where it is stated that he was educated. It is probable, however, that he graduated before 1518, for without a university training, even in those days of precocious learning, he could hardly have occupied the position we find him holding in Poland in 1518 and again in 1524, and have published such work as he then did. In 1524, at any rate, Cox was abroad again, as we have seen. There he remained at least until 1527, since in 1526 we find him publishing another work in Cracow, his Methodus Studiorum Humaniorum, and in 1527 Erasmus is writing to him about affairs in Hungary. It therefore seems improbable that the first edition of his Rhetoric, published without date, but assigned definitely to 1524 by many bibliographers, could have appeared in that year, written as it is from his school in Reading. Probably, however, somewhere between 1527 and 1530, Cox returned to England and was appointed master of the school at Reading by Hugh Faringdon, the abbot of the place. He was certainly in this position before February 1530, when he supplicated for incorporation and for M.A. at Oxford, as being schoolmaster at Reading. Again, it is impossible to assume with Hallam that Cox's Rhetoric was written in 1524, and that his Methodus Humaniorum Studiorum in 1526 is a translation of the Rhetoric into Latin, for the simple reason that the Rhetoric is itself in greater part a translation from a well-known Latin original into English, as I shall later have occasion to show, and there could be no reason for making another version in Latin by translating back from the English. In May 1527, Erasmus, whose name we find mentioned several times in the course of the following Rhetoric, wrote to Cox, who was probably still at Cassau, a letter which has been preserved among the epistles of Erasmus. The following synopsis of the letter is given in Brewer. Thanks him for his letters. Is sorry to hear of the ill health of their friend Justus. His copia has been again edited 6 months ago. Gives an account of a disputed reading in Aulus Gellius, when, 20 years ago, he was engaged at Siena in teaching Alexander, the Archbishop of St. Andrews, brother of the present King of Scotland. Basel, 21st May, 1527. In addition, I find in the original letter the following passage, the precise bearing of which perhaps cannot now be explained, but which is interesting as throwing some light on Cox's ambitions and affiliations during his abode in Poland. The churchmen referred to may possibly be the Eustace already mentioned in the letter, while Casoviensis evidently refers to the Casovia or Cassau already mentioned as the seat of the school whence Cox dates the dedication to his Scholia on the Venatio of Adrian. Ecclesiaste Casoviensis animum satis admirari non possum, sentio fortunam amplectendam, vel ob id quo pluribus prodesse ques, vel ob hoc ne pessimo quique sit contemptui, etsi qui dignitate preeminent non possunt omnia corrigere, quae geri conspicuent vel a populo, vel a principibus, tamen nam parum malorum possunt excludere, si nos invisat reperiet nihil aliud, quam pro thesauro carbones. Cox apparently did not embrace the opportunity suggested, but soon after returned to England. Whether he made any other sojourn abroad is doubtful, and it is probably during these years that his reputation as a European scholar, testified to by Leland, Bale, and other and later biographers, was established. Leland's verses are interesting, and taken in connection with Erasmus's letter, show us among other things the comparatively high regard in which Cox was held in his own day, and evince at least some sort of a connection with Melanchthon. Ad Leonardum Coxum, inclita Sarmaticae Cracauia gloria gentis, virtutes novit Coxe disserte tuas, novit et eloqui Phoenix Etrusque Melanchthon, quam te Phoebus amet, periusque chorus, praga tuas cecinitque lutetia laudes, urbs erga doctos officiosa viros, talia cum constent genitrix tua propria debet, Anglia te simili concelebrare modo, et faciet nam me cantatam nuper adorta, hoc ipsum usit significare tibi. In or about 1530, then, Cox was appointed master of the grammar school of Reading, Berks, under the patronage of the abbot Hugh Faringdon, a man of some prominence in the political and religious affairs of the day. And soon afterwards Cox was incorporated at Oxford, receiving his B.A. degree there, February 19th, 1530, N.S. Cox appears to have remained at Reading as schoolmaster, with occasional journeys elsewhere connected with other matters from 1530 to 1541. In or about 1530 also I date conjecturally the first edition of Cox's Rhetoric, for the reasons given above. The second edition appeared in 1532, with a few slight changes to be noted further on. In 1530 appeared John Palsgrave's L'Esclassisme de la langue francoise, in which occur two sets of prefatory Latin verses written by Cox, the first being headed Leonardi Coxi Redingienses ludi moderatoris ad Gallicae linguae studiosos Carmen, while the second are complementary verses Oiustum Coxi ad eruditum virum Gefridum Troy de Burgis Gallum. In 1532 we hear of Cox again at Reading. About the middle of this year, John Frith, the martyr, venturing back to England after his long exile abroad, visited Reading, where on his arrival he was set in the stocks. Cox, says Wood, who soon discovered his merit by his conversation, relieved his wants, and out of regard to his learning procured his release. A deed worthy of a humanist and friend of Erasmus. In 1534 we get a glimpse of Cox's occupations and ambitions in a letter of his dated from Reading, 13th of May, 1534, and addressed to "the good man Toy at the sign of St. Nicholas in Paul's churchyard." It is to be found among the letters and papers of the reign of Henry VIII in the Record Office, volume 7, number 659. Good man Toy, I heartily commend me to you and your good wife, and here I have sent you the paraphrase of Erasmus, with the epistle of St. Paul to Titus, and my preface made, as you can bear me record, but suddenly, wherefore it cannot be but easy. Nevertheless, I will desire you to show it unto the right worshipful Master Cromwell, and in any wise to know his pleasure whether it shall abroad or not. If his mastership think it be meet to be printed, I shall, if it so please him, either translate the work that Erasmus made of the manner of prayer, or his paraphrase upon the first and second epistle to Timothy, or else such works as shall please his mastership, and dedicate also any such labours to him. But if this that I have done shall not please his mastership, my trust is yet that he will take no displeasure with me, seeing I did it for a good intent, as the preface to the reader declareth. And again, I would not have it abroad, without his pleasure aforeknowen. I am also a translating of a book which Erasmus made of the bringing up of children, which I intend to dedicate to the said Master Cromwell, and that shortly after Whitsuntide. Moreover, it showed me that his mastership is recorder of Bristol. Wherefore, if I may know by your letters that he is content with my doings, I intend to write to him and beseech him to be my good master for the obtaining of the free school there. For though I have many good masters in the cause, yet I had lever have his favour than all the others. Yea, and it so pleased his mastership, I would be right glad to bear the name of his servant. And so, if you have opportunity, I pray you show him, and send me word what answer you have. Fare you well. From Reading, the 13th day of May. Your own Leonard COX. The goodman Toy, to whom this letter was written, was the printer John Toy, who issued in 1531 Gradus comparationum cum verbis anomalis simul cum erum compositus, imprinted at London in Paul's churchyard at the sign of St. Nicholas by me, John Toy. Wolsey's fall occurred in 1529, and by 1533 Cromwell's position and power were well established. Cox is turning to the rising sun. We do not hear of Cox again until 1540, when we find him writing directly to his patron Cromwell as follows. Please your good lordship, whereas I, your poor bounden servant and daily beadman, have oftentimes considered your special good favour toward me in times past when I was waiting in the court on Sir John Wallop, which it afterward pleased you to renew of your singular goodness when I was last in your lordship's presence at Thornbury. I have been at all times greatly ashamed of myself that I had nothing whereby I might declare again to your good lordship my faithful heart and serviceable mind for your so great benevolence. Whereupon I have at the last drawn a comment upon a book made sometime by Master Lilly and corrected by Erasmus, which work of grammar is much set by in all schools both on this side the sea and beyond. This comment of mine made upon the said book I have here sent and dedicated to you, my special good lord, as part of witness of my faithful service owed to you for your singular goodness to me, your poor beadman. And though my said diligence be far beneath my duty to your so singular benevolence, yet I most humbly beseech your most good lordship to accept it. And I shall, God willing, or long dedicate to you better things. Our Lord preserve your estate with all prosperity and increase of honour. Your good lordship's bounden servant and beadman, Leonard COX. Endorsed, to the right honourable and my special good lord, the Lord Privy Seal. The second letter is as follows. My singular good lord, please your good lordship to understand that a little afore Whitsuntide I received a letter from Monsieur Berthlet, printer to the King's most honourable highness, wherein he certified me of your lordship's goodness toward me, as well in accepting my poor book as in admitting me into your service, and of a further promise of your special benevolence, for the which I am most bounden of all men, not only to employ myself with all true diligence to your lordship the best service that I can, but also to be your daily bedeman during my life. I beseech your good lordship to pardon me that I have not or this time, as my duty is, given attendance on your lordship. But I trust, or Michaelmas, to bring with me to you a fair better work than that which I have dedicate to you already, and that upon rhetoric, which I intend to entitle Erotemata Rhetorica. I know right well the feebleness of my wit is such that in other things I can do your lordship but small service or none. Yet in this I trust so to serve you that the world shall always be mindful of your singular beneficence, not to me only, but to all that be studious of good learning. Wherein I will neither spare busy study and labour, nor cost on books. And once every year I intend, during my life, by God's grace, to set abroad one thing or other to the perpetual praise of your lordship's most excellent virtues, and the common profit of students. Thus with all humility I for this present time take my leave, beseeching the blessed Trinity long to preserve your good lordship, with continual increase of most prosperous honour. Written at Caerleon in Wales on Trinity Sunday. Your good lordship's poor servant and bounden bedeman, Leonard COX. Endorsed, to the right honourable and my singular good lord, the Lord Privy Seal. The Erotemata Rhetorica, unfortunately, we do not possess. It is likely enough that the confusion and change of fortune intervening on the tragic ending of his patron so soon after writing these letters prevented Cox from going on with his plan. This last letter, it will be noticed, is dated from Caerleon, in Wales. Whether Cox, whose birthplace was in Wales, was there simply on a visit, or whether he had gone to reside there, perhaps after the equally tragic death of his old patron, the Abbot of Reading, in 1539, and was teaching school there, as Wood conjectures, is uncertain. It is, however, certain, whether in the meanwhile he had left Reading or not, that on February 10th, 1541, a royal patent was issued granting and confirming to Cox the office of Master of the Grammar School at Reading. Dedimus et concedimus, as the document runs, ac per presentes damus and concedimus aedem Leonardo officium magistri sive preceptores schola grammaticalis sive ludi literati ville nostrae de Reading in comitatu nostro Berks. The patent then proceeds also to grant to Cox the message which he was then occupying, together with a plot of ground adjoining ex parte Australi, ac etiam quodam aliud Mesuagium sive domum in Reading predicta modo inteniora e occupatione predicti Leonardi vocata a schoolhouse, in quo pueri modo erediuntur et docentur in arte e scientia predictis. It is also provided that Cox during his lifetime may hold the grant by deputy. In addition, he is to receive quondam annuitatem sive annualem reditum decem librerum de exitibus proficuis firmis reventionibus manieri nostri de Chelsea indicto comitatu nostro Berks. The manor of Chelsea, from which Cox was to receive his annual stipend of £10, belonged to the lately dissolved monastery of Reading. Of Cox's later years we know very little. Bale, in his brief account of Cox, mentions vaguely only one date. Claruit, he writes, Anno Domini quindecim quadraginta. Tanner, giving Bale as his authority for the first date, says Claruit grandavos a quindecim quadraginta vel a quindecim quadraginta novum. Vid prefat paraphrase ad titum. Tanner thinks that perhaps Cox was master of the grammar school founded at Coventry by his friend John Hales, to whom he dedicates the translation of the paraphrase just referred to. Colville and Cooper both positively assert that he became master there in 1572. Cooper adds that if he held that appointment till his death, he must have died in 1599, when John Tovey succeeded to the mastership. At this last date Cox would have been probably over 100, and on his appointment at Coventry over 70. If the name of Leonard COX appears in the list of the masters of the Coventry School, the conjecture may be hazarded that this was perhaps a son of our Leonard COX, bearing the same name. At all events, it is evident that Cox lived on into the reign of Edward VI, under whom it is stated that he was one of the licensed preachers. He left a son, Francis, who became a D.D. of New College, Oxford, in 1594, and according to Knight, another son, William, who was more likely, as others state, a grandson. Cox's name since his death has been known to few except professed antiquarians. End of section 2. Section 3 of the Art or Craft of Rhetoric. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Amelia Chesley. The Art or Craft of Rhetoric by Leonard COX. List of works by COX. Works about the existence of which there is considerable doubt are enclosed in brackets. 1. Coxus L. De Laudibus Cracoviensis Academiae Octo idus Decembris habita oratio a quindecim duo de vigenti. Cracoviae quatuor Vietor. Copy in the Czartoryskische Museum in Krakow. 2. Adriani Cardinalis Venatio una cum scholis non ineruditis Leonardi COXi Britanni. Colophon. Cracowie in aedibus Hieronymi Vietores typographi diligentissimi. Mensi Ionio. An de 1024 sic. There is a copy in the British Museum and one also in the National Library at Paris. In the dedication, Cox discusses the Latinity of his author, the value of the book for reading in schools, and how it has helped to repel barbarous Latinity and to lead the way back to Cicero. There is a word in praise of Politian, who, it will be noticed, is cited also in the Rhetoric. Cox's text is merely a scholastic commentary, line by line, on Adrian's verses. At H4 recto there is a mention of Erasmus. 3a. Leonardi COXi Methodus Humaniorum Studiorum. Cracoviae in aedibus Hieronymi Vietores ipsis calendis Augusti anno quindecim viginti quatuor. B. Also in the same year, a second edition with the same title, but the following imprint: Cracoviae in Officina Topographica Matthias Scharfenberg, anno quindecim vigenti sex. From Panzer Annales Typographici, Nuremberg, 1798, volume 6, pages 468 through 469. It will be noticed that the first edition is from the same printer as number 1. I have been unable to discover a copy of either edition. 4. De erudienda inventute ad P. Tomicium. Cracoviae, 1526. Viator. 5a. The Art or Craft of Rhetoric. No date. Colophon. Imprinted at London in Fleet Street by me, Robert Redman, dwelling at the sign of the George, cum privilegio. B. The Art or Craft of Rhetoric, within a rude ornamental border. Imprinted at London in Fleet Street by St. Dunstone's Church at the sign of the George by me, Robert Redman, the year of our Lord God 1532 and 30. Cum privilegio. The dedication in both editions is addressed to Hugh Farington, Abbot of Reading, by Cox, Leonard COX COX in A, and Leonard COX COCKES in B. Both are printed in eighths in very small octavo size. In A, the signatures run from A1 to F4, a total of 88 pages, about 30 lines to the page. In B to F8, or 96 pages, 91 pages of text, about 29 lines to the page. Both are in black letter of apparently the same font. For reasons given above, I date A conjecturally circa 1530. It is not impossible, however, that B was the first edition, although it is highly improbable. Considering the close similarity of the two in typographical appearance, it is not likely that they were separated in date more than 2 or 3 years. A is the basis of the present reprint, although all the more important variations in B have been noted. There is a copy of A in the British Museum, and of B in the Bodleian Library at Oxford. Mr. A. W. Pollard of the British Museum conjectures from its appearance that A was printed circa 1530. Mr. R. Proctor puts it circa 1535. In the British Museum catalogue, and by most bibliographers, it is put in 1524. Redman, the printer of this work, began business in 1525, and died in 1540. Herbert, however, says in a note, "Mr. Ames was informed that he (Redman) began printing in the year 1523, but he had not seen any proof of it before 1525. Neither have I." This is the work mentioned by Tanner in his list of Cox's works as De Rhetorica Anglicae, Holinshead 3, 978. Librum aliquem Thyrde Hugoni Abbati Readingiensi. Holinshead, in the passage referred to, merely mentions Cox as the author of a rhetoric in English, not mentioned by Bale. 6. Latin verses appearing on the verso of the title page of John Palsgrave's L'Esclaircissement de la langue francoise, 1530, folio, as follows: Leonardi Coxi, Readingiensis ludi moderatoris ad Gallicae linguae studiosos Carmen. Gallica quisquis amas exacte verba sonare, et pariter certis jungere dicta modis. Nulla sit in tota menda ut sermone reperta, pro vero Gallo, quin facile ipse probes. Hec iole me Palgravi scripta desirti, his linguam normis usque polire stude, sic te meritur laudeque urbs docta loquentem, Lutitia indigenam ioret et esse suum. Eustem coxi ad eruditum urum Gaffridium Troy de Burgess Gallum, campi floridi authorem, quem ille sua lingua camp fliori vocat, nomine hominum Anglorum falutium. Campo quod toties Gefride docte in Florente tu cupisti habemus, nam sub legibus hic bene approbatis, sermo Gallicus ecce perdocetur, non rem grammaticam Paleomon ante tractarat melius suis Latinis, quod florerantur posterorum, nec Graecis melius putato gazam. Intruxis suos libris politis, sui quod pretio prius friere, quam nunc Gallica iste nostra tradit, est doctus facilis brusque quantum res permittit, et inde nos uamus, quampo quod toties Gefride docte in Florente tuo cupisti habentes. These doubtless, and perhaps others, are to be included in the diversi generes carmina et epistolas Lib unus, written by Cox according to Bale, and described by Tanner in the following terms: Epigrammata varia et epistolas. Duo ejus carmina. 1. Ad lingua Gallicae studiosos. 2. Ad Galfre Troy actorum Gallicum. Praefiguntur lexico. John Palsgrave, London, 1530. Folio. The Geoffrey Troy addressed is alluded to by Palsgrave in the epistle as Geoffrey Troy de Burghs, a late writer of the French nation, in his book entitled Cham Fleury. Troy, or Tory, Latin Torinus, was a celebrated printer, engraver, scholar, and author of the time. See, for example, the Summaire des Chroniques, translate de latine in langue francois, par Meister Geoffrey Tory de Burghs, 1529. He was born at Burghs circa 1485 and died 1533 at Paris. Palsgrave's phrase above probably does not mean to refer to him as dead, but as having lately written books. Son œuvre capitale est un ouvrage qu'il composa et publia sous le titre de Cham Fleury, auquel est contenu à essence de la 2 et 3 proportion des lettres antiques, con d'autres lettres antiques et vulgairement lettres romanes, proportionnées selon le corps et le visage humain. Paris, 1529. Où il jette les bases d'une nouvelle grammaire française. 7. Translation of Erasmus's paraphrase of the Epistle of Paul to Titus with a preface, made in 1534, but apparently not printed till 1549, in the Paraphrase of Erasmus upon the New Testament. London, Edward Whitechurch, 1548-49, 2 volumes, folio, in volume 2. Bracket 8. Translation of a book which Erasmus made of the bringing up of children, in 1534. See page 13, probably not printed. Close bracket. 9. Commentaries upon Lily. De octo orationis partium construction liberos, editus Agil Lilo, emendatus ab Erasmo Roter, Iscolius non solum Henrici Primei, verum etiam doctissimis Leonard COXi illustratus. Anno quindecim quadraginta, ex officina regi impressoris, cum privilegio solum, anno quindecim quadraginta, quarto. From Herbert Ames' Typographical Antiquities, Volume 1, page 438, among works printed by Thomas Bertholet, many other editions of this work of Lilly's appeared during the 16th century, but none other, I believe, with Cox's Scholia. A copy is said by Herbert to have been in the collection of Dr. Lort. I have not been able to find one. Referred to in Cox's letters above, page 14. Bracket 10. Erotemata Rhetorica. Probably not printed, but evidently nearly completed in May 1540. See above, page 15. Close bracket. Bracket 11. A. The translation described by Bale, E Greco in Latinum venerabilis antiquitates scriptorum Marcum eremitam de lege spiritu, lib unus. B. To which Tanner adds, E justem de justificatione operum. Close bracket. B is perhaps the same work referred to by Tanner when he says that Cox bracket 12 scripsit contra justificationem ab operibus lib unus, and by Bale scripsit contra eos qui ab operibus justificant lib unus. Close bracket. So far as I can discover, none of these last mentioned works were ever printed. End of section 3. Section 4 of the Art or Craft of Rhetoric. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Amelia Chesley. The Art or Craft of Rhetoric. The Rhetoric of COX, its predecessors and successors. The work of COX and his chief service to his age was that of a translator and commentator, a sort of work much more important in that century than in this. COX, like Colet, Grocyn, Linacre, and Lilly, served as an intermediary in the transmission to England of the Renaissance and humanistic influence in literature. He had a reputation of his own among European scholars and men of the new learning, and he helped to carry their work into England. And so the questions of rhetoric and of literary form, which deeply concerned all the men of the new learning, came to concern COX also, and to their elucidation, as is evident from the foregoing inspection of his letters and of the list of his writings, he devoted a large share of his attention. The rhetorics of the Renaissance are mainly founded upon Hermogenes, Cicero, and Quintilian, and following the divisions of these authors are chiefly of two sorts, those that concern themselves with questions of invention and disposition, and those that mainly discuss matters of style and diction. COX, whose work falls in the first class, refers his readers who may wish to carry their studies further to Hermogenes among the Greeks, or else Tully and Trapezounce among the Latins. The Trapezounce, or Trapezountius, referred to, was a typical rhetorician of the Renaissance period. Born in Crete in 1396, he taught Greek at Venice and philosophy and belles lettres at Rome. On account of an attack of his on Quintilian, he was involved in various literary quarrels with Valla, Poggio, and other scholars. He made numerous translations from the Greek into Latin. He died at Rome in 1486. His Rhetoric, the first edition of which appeared at Venice circa 1470, is a paraphrase from Hermogenes. His work, transmitting that of his original, was widely circulated and exercised a great influence throughout Europe during the succeeding century. His divisions and order of treatment in a general way are those of COX, and of course COX's original, Melanchthon. Orations are of three sorts: judicial, referring to the past, deliberative, to the future, and demonstrative, to the present. The chief parts of an oration are the exordium, narratio, and contentio, whereunder are discussed confirmatio and confutatio, quod sint status, the states of COX, and de propositione et divisione. In the last book, Book 5, is comprehended a discussion de elocutione, wherein the different qualities and kinds of style are considered, a part included by Melanchthon but omitted by COX, for reasons hinted at in his dedicatory epistle. As in COX's Rhetoric, so in most of his predecessors, we frequently find appeal made not only to direct classical authority, but occasionally also to medieval authority, and to that of the Fathers of the Church, especially the Greek Fathers, as Origen, Basil, and Chrysostom. Most interesting for the history of English rhetoric, however, is the first Rhetoric printed in England, which was also the first book printed at St. Albans, the Latin treatise of Trapezounus, entitled Fratris Laurentii Guilhelmi de Suana Prohimium in Novam Rhetoricam. The colophon is Completatum autem fuit hoc opus in alma Universitate Cantabriae, anno Domini 14 septaginta octo, sub protectione Regis Anglorum Eduardi IV, impressium fuit hoc praesens opus rhetoricae facultatis apud vilam sancti Albani, anno Domini 14 octoginta. The work follows in general the divisions of the ancient rhetorics, especially Cicero, and draws its examples both from Cicero and from the Bible. It is scholastic in tone, with frequent reference to the Fathers of the Church, as St. Bernard, St. Anselm, St. Basil, Beda, etc. Book 1 discusses quid sit oratis, quid oratis officium, quis eius finis et de partibus eius e oracionis. In the third book, style and diction, including tropes and figures, are treated. In this work, however, notwithstanding certain signs of the approaching dawning of the new learning, we are still in the atmosphere of the Middle Ages. With Cox 50 years later, in spite of the rudeness of the new vernacular in which he is working, and the elementary nature of his design, we feel ourselves in a new age. Between Traversanus and Cox, there are two passages in English literature relating to the art of rhetoric which are significant. The former of these, which is perhaps the first printed account of rhetoric in English, is the short passage on the subject in Caxton's Mirror and Description of the World, with many marvels of the seven sciences as grammar, rhetoric, with the art of memory, etc., 1481, which is of sufficient curious interest to reproduce here in its entirety. D3 Recto. Rhetoric is a science to cause another man, by speech or by writing, to believe or to do that thing which thou wouldest have him for to do. To the which thou must first devise some way to make thy hearers glad and well willing to hear. The which thing to bring to pass thou must devise diverse ways. The first is that thou promise him some marvellous thing, or some other strange thing, or something touching himself, or some things touching his friends or his enemies. Also, when thou hast made him glad to hear thee, thou must take heed that in the matter which thou shewest thou must use 5 manner things. The first is invention, as to imagine the matter which thou intendest to show, which must be of true things, or like to be true, and to note well how many things in that matter ought to be spoken. The second thing is disposition, which is to show every thing of thy matter in order, as when thou hast invented and appointed in thy mind how many things thou wilt speak of. Then thou must dispose every thing in order, and which matter shall be first spoken, and which shall be last. The third thing is eloquence, as when thou hast disposed how every point and matter shall be showed in order, then thou must utter it with fair eloquent words, and not to use many curious terms, for superfluity in everything is to be dispraised, and it hindereth the sentence. And when a man delateth his matter too long, ere that he utter the effect of his sentence, though it be never so well uttered, it shall be tedious unto the hearers. For every man naturally that heareth another desireth most to know the effect of his reason that telleth the tale, as the philosopher saith, omnis homo naturalatia sire desiderat. Therefore, the principal point of eloquence writeth (resteth) ever in the quick sentence. And therefore the least point belonging to rhetoric is to take heed that the tale be quick and sententious. A passage on ars memoratua, or memory, and one on voice and gesture follow. Equally curious are the chapters in Hawes' Pastime of Pleasure, chapters 7 through 13, in which we are told how grande amore was received of rhetoric, and what rhetoric is; of the first part, called invention, and a commendation of poets; of disposition, the second part of rhetoric; of elocution, the third part of rhetoric, with coloring of sentences; of pronunciation, the fourth part of rhetoric; of memory, the fifth part of rhetoric, and the like. No one can complain of the importance attributed to the art of rhetoric in Hawes' allegorical system. Cox's aim in presenting an art or craft of rhetoric to the English public of his day was a simple and a practical one. Education was spreading. New grammar schools were being founded. In much of the work of teaching in these schools the vernacular necessarily was used. The new learning brought with it a new sense of style and form in prose, and there were no textbooks of the subject in existence written in English. Lawyers, ambassadors, preachers, and all public speakers, says Cox in his interesting preface, have need of rhetoric, yet nothing today is less taught. What wretched work do we daily see around us for lack of such teaching? so that when we hear a speaker, very often great tediousness is engendered to the multitude being present, by occasion whereof the speaker is many times, or he have ended his tale, either left almost alone to his no little confusion, or else, which is a like rebuke to him, the audience falleth for weariness of his ineloquent language on sleep. Furthermore, Cox aims especially to help those who have by negligence or else false persuasions be put to the learning of other sciences, or ever they have attained any mean knowledge of the Latin tongue. For of course, not only is Latin the accepted central discipline in the humanistic theory of education, but it is the storehouse of all existing learning. The book is intended for young beginners. Others, who can read Latin or Greek, may consult Hermogenes among the Greeks, or else Tully or Trapezounce among the Latins. And to them that be young beginners, nothing can be too plain or too short. We are reminded of the similar words of Colet in his Proheme to the introduction of the parts of speaking for children and young beginners into Latin speech, written for his new school of Powell's in 1510, where that kindly humanist maintains that nothing may be too soft nor too familiar for little children. Cox is thus, it will be seen, little concerned with the theory of rhetoric. His aim is to tell very plainly the manner of the putting together, the invention, of orations of the several kinds then recognized by the rhetoricians. Every point is illustrated by an example. We are told in a given situation what is the leading idea pertinent thereto, which it is incumbent on the orator to bring forward. Most of these leading cases are drawn from Cicero, others from Livy, Sallust, and the like. Then we are shown how Cicero or another actually did put his oration together. The whole method is that of the Ciceronians and the Renaissance educators, simplified and put into the vernacular for the use of those who cannot use Latin texts and manuals. 50 years later, the same method, without simplification or vernacularization, is still in use in the English universities, where the orations of Cicero continue to serve as models in the teaching of rhetoric. Cox's work, then, is designed as a schoolbook and as an elementary introduction for those who have missed the advantages of a scholastic training. His plan is restricted to the treatment of invention and the formal ordering of speech, for that, once mastered, there is no very great mastery to come by the residue. And it is in this that the public speaking of the day is particularly deficient. Questions of style must be postponed to a later generation, after the matter of structure has been mastered. And indeed, by the time of Sir Thomas Wilson in 1553, the question of style has begun to assert itself, until with the Elizabethans it is the question of questions. Furthermore, if this work, the first essay of my poor and simple wit, find favor, the author promises to indite other works both in this faculty and other. Inasmuch as the rhetoric passed to a second edition, we may conclude that it met with success, and probably the Erotemata Rhetorica, upon which Cox was engaged in 1540, were designed as a part fulfillment of this promise. Cox's art or craft of rhetoric is only in part his own composition. It is, as he frankly avows, largely founded upon the work of another. I have partly translated out of a work of rhetoric written in the Latin tongue, and partly compiled of mine own, and so made a little treatise in a manner of an introduction into this aforesaid science, and that in the English tongue. And later, in the conclusion, Cox says, "But now I have followed the fashion of Tully, who made a several work of invention." Cicero, however, is not Cox's chief authority, nor does he seem to have taken very much directly out of Cicero's rhetorical writings. The work of rhetoric written in the Latin tongue, out of which Cox translates and on which his work is mainly founded, is the Institutiones Rhetoricae of Melanchthon, published in 1521. Melanchthon is our aucteur, so frequently referred to in the course of Cox's work. Readers of Professor C. H. Hereford's scholarly work on the literary relations of England and Germany in the 16th century are aware how close was the connection of English and German scholarship and letters in the first half of that century. Cox, like Melanchthon, was an educator and humanist, and inclined to the reformed religious doctrine, while his failure to mention Melanchthon's name anywhere is doubtless to be attributed to the prejudice against the German reformers in high quarters in England at this moment. When the idea of bringing out a work on the art of rhetoric written in English first occurred to Cox, it was natural that he should turn to the convenient compendium of the subject recently written by the great humanist educator and religious reformer of Germany, with whom, probably enough, he had already come in contact on the continent. In 1519, Melanchthon had written a larger work on rhetoric, his De Rhetorica Libratrice, to which Cox refers 2 or 3 times, and from which he borrows several passages. In 1521, however, a shorter and a much simplified version adapted to school use was compiled, perhaps from the notes of Melanchthon's lectures, and published with the title Institutiones Rhetoricae, Philip Melanchthon. From the first book of this work, treating of invention, Cox draws the greater part of his treatise, and this book accordingly is herewith reprinted for convenience of comparison. I reserve for the notes the discussion of the exact relation between the 2 works. A cursory comparison of the 2 texts will show the closeness of Cox's dependence on his original. At the same time, numerous passages in Cox seem to be of independent composition. Particularly interesting among these are many of the illustrations drawn from Renaissance and medieval history and literature, as well as some things also from Cicero and the classics. Not only does Cox add to Melanchthon, but he freely omits and condenses as suits his purpose. Thus, as already stated, he omits the whole of books 2 and 3 on dispositio and elocutio. Melanchthon's own direct prototypes seem to be Hermogenes or Trapezuintius, the latter he refers to with approval, Cicero, and Quintilian. All of these, except the last, are expressly named by Cox as trustworthy authorities. Cox's rhetoric doubtless served its turn with its own generation, but any direct influence from it on later English rhetorical writers can scarcely be traced. Cox's work helped to teach better order and method in public speaking, an aim which also inspires his next important successor, Sir Thomas Wilson. But with anything beyond the structural part of composition, Cox is hardly concerned. The preoccupation with style comes in with the next generation. Cox's own prose has some historical value among the none too numerous monuments of English prose in the first half of the 16th century. His style is of purpose extremely simple and plain, in order to meet the understanding of young beginners. But joined with his simplicity, there is a certain rudeness, which is not the strong and eloquent rudeness of Latimer, and a certain awkwardness of phrase and syntax which prevent our placing him as a writer of English anywhere near his great predecessor Malory, his great contemporaries Moore, Colet, Tyndale, and Coverdale, and Eliot, or his great successors Ascham and Wilson. He writes purely didactic prose, it is true, in which there is no opportunity for style. He saves himself from excessive Latinisms. His manner is straightforward and to the point, but little more than this can be said for him as a writer of English. In Cox's day, English prose is but in the making, and with few, except 1 or 2 original spirits, does it advance to style. And Cox is not one of the originators. Nevertheless, in his way, by precept if not by example, he contributed to the formation of the new art, and so is to be reckoned with in the history of English prose. The next and the only other important English rhetoric of the 16th century after Cox was the Art of Rhetoric for the use of all such as are studious of eloquence, set forth in English by Thomas Wilson. Anno Domini quindecim quinquaginta-tres, mense Januarii. Wilson's work is much superior to Cox in originality and scope. Wilson follows the Ciceronian tradition with more independence. He aims to cover the entire field of the older rhetorics, treating in order of invention, disposition, elocution, i.e. diction, or an applying of apt words and sentences to the matter, memory, and utterance, or a framing of the voice, countenance, and gesture after a comely manner. The parts of an oration, too, from the entrance to the conclusion, are as in Cox and his predecessors, and so are the sorts of oratory, Oracion Demonftratiue, Deliberative, and Judiciall. In his first and second books, except for greater amplification and a surer hand, Wilson's work differs little in structure and design from Cox's. The rest of the work, however, is entirely additional matter, and the chief interest of Wilson's rhetoric is in his discussion of English style and diction in his third book. It is probable enough that Wilson may have seen Cox's book, but evidently he owes less to it than to their common sources. After Wilson, the emphasis in the popular rhetorics of the day is upon style and ornament rather than upon structure and argument, as with Cox and Wilson. No original work, however, is done until Ben Jonson's scholarship touches the subject in his Timber or Discoveries, and until Bacon, in his Advancement of Learning, stirs the earth a little about the roots of this science, reprehending the first distemper of learning when men study words and not matter, and uttering upon the rhetorical precept and practice of the preceding century, upon Carr and Ascham, upon Sturmius and Erasmus, the trenchant comment that the whole inclination and bent of those times was rather towards copy than weight. The outline and analysis of Philip Melanchthon's Institutiones Rhetoricae has been omitted from this recording. End of section 4. Section 5 of the Art or Craft of Rhetoric. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Amelia Chesley. The Art or Craft of Rhetoric by Leonard COX. Dedication. To the Reverend Father in God and his singular good Lord, the Lord Hugh Farrington, Abbot of Reading, his poor client and perpetual servant, Leonard COX, desireth long and prosperous life, with increase of honour. Considering, my special good Lord, how greatly and how many ways I am bounden to your lordship, and among all other, that in so great a number of cunning men which are now within this region, it hath pleased your goodness to accept me as worthy to have the charge of the instruction and bringing up of such youth as resorteth to your grammar school, founded by your antecessors in this your town of Reading. I studied a long space what thing I might do next, the busy and diligent occupying of myself in your said service, to the which both conscience and your stipend doth straitly bind me, that might be a signification of my faithful and serviceable heart, which I owe to your lordship, and again a long memory both of your singular and beneficial favour toward me, and of mine industry and diligence employed in your service to some profit, or at the least way to some delectation of the inhabitants of this noble realm, now flourishing under the most excellent and victorious prince, our sovereign lord King Henry VIII. And when I had thus long perpensed in my mind what thing I might best choose out, none offered itself more convenient to the profit of young students, which your good lordship hath always tenderly favoured, and also meeter to my profession, than to make some proper work of the right pleasant and persuadable art of rhetoric, which as it is very necessary to all such as will either be advocates and proctors in the law, or else apt to be sent in their princes' ambassades, or to be teachers of God's word in such manner as may be most sensible and accept to their audience. And finally to all them that have anything to propose or to speak afore any company, whatsomever they be. So contrarily, I see no science that is less taught and declared to scholars, which ought chiefly, after the knowledge of grammar once had, to be instruct in this faculty, without the which oftentimes the rude utterance of the advocate greatly hindereth and appaireth his client's cause. Likewise the unapt disposition of the preacher in ordering his matter confoundeth the memory of his hearers. And briefly, in declaring of matters, for lack of invention and order with due elocution, great tediousness is engendered to the multitude being present By occasion whereof the speaker is many times ere he have ended his tale either left almost alone to his no little confusion, or else, which is a like rebuke to him, the audience falleth for weariness of his ineloquent language fast on sleep. Willing, therefore, for my part, to help such as are desirous of this art, as all surely ought to be which intend to be regarded in any commonality, I have partly translated out of a work of rhetoric written in the Latin tongue, and partly compiled of mine own, and so made a little treatise in manner of an introduction into this aforesaid science, and that in the English tongue. Remembering that every good thing, after the saying of the philosopher, the more common that it is, the better it is, and furthermore trusting thereby to do some pleasure and ease to such as have by negligence or else false persuasions be put to the learning of other sciences, or ever they have attained any mean knowledge of the Latin tongue. Which my said labour I humbly offer to your good lordship as to the chief maintainer and nourisher of my study, beseeching you, though it be fair within your merits done to me to accept it as the first assay of my poor and simple wit, which if it may first please your lordship, and next the readers, I trust by the aid of Almighty God to indite other works, both in this faculty and other, to the laud of the high Godhead, of whom all goodness doth proceed, and to your lordship's pleasure, and to profit and delectation of the reader. End of section 5. Section 6 of the Art or Craft of Rhetoric. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Amelia Chesley. The Art or Craft of Rhetoric by Leonard COX. The Art or Craft of Rhetoric. Whomsoever desireth to be a good orator, or to dispute and commune of any manner thing, him behoveth to have 4 things. The first is called invention, for he must first of all imagine or invent in his mind what he shall say. The second is named judgment, for he must have wit to discern and judge whether the things that he hath found in his mind be convenient to the purpose or not. For oftentimes if a man lack this propriety, he may as well tell that that is against him as with him, as experience doth daily show. The third is disposition, whereby he may know how to order and set every thing in his due place, lest, though his invention and judgment be never so good, he may happen to be counted, as the common proverb saith, to put the cart afore the horse. The fourth, and is such things last, as he hath invented and by judgment known apt to his purpose, when they are set in their order, so to speak them that it may be pleasant and delectable to the audience. So that it may be said of him, that histories make mention that an old woman said once by Demosthenes, and since hath been a common proverb among the Greeks, Αυτός ἐστις, which is as much to say as, this is he. And this last propriety is called among learned men eloquence. Of these 4, the most difficile or hard is to invent what thou must say, wherefore of this part the rhetoricians which be masters of this art have written very much and diligently. Invention is comprehended in certain places, as the rhetoricians call them, out of whom he that knoweth the faculty may fetch easily such things as be meet for the matter that he shall speak of. Which matter the orator calleth the theme, and in our vulgar tongue it is called improperly the antitheme. The theme proposed, we must after the rules of rhetoric go to our places that shall anon show unto us what shall be to our purpose. Example. In old time there was a great envy between 2 noblemen of Rome, of whom the one was called Milo and the other Claudius. The which malice grew so far that Claudius laid wait for Milo on a season when he should ride out of the city, and in his journey set upon him, and there as it chanced Claudius was slain. Whereupon this Claudius's friends accused Milo to the Senate of murder. Tully, which in those days was a great advocate in Rome, should plead Milo's cause. Now it was open that Milo had slain Claudius, but whether he had slain him lawfully or not was the doubt. So then the theme of Tully's oration, or plea for Milo, was this, that he had slain Claudius lawfully, and therefore he ought not to be punished. For the confirmation whereof, as doth appear in Tully's oration, he did bring out of places of rhetoric arguments to prove his said theme or purpose. And likewise must we do when we have any matter to speak or commune of. As if I should make an oration to the laud and praise of the king's highness, I must for the invention of such things as be for my purpose go to the places of rhetoric, where I shall easily find, after I know the rules, that I desire. Here is to be noted that there is no theme but it is contained under one of four causes, or for the more plains, four kinds of orations. The first is called logical, which kind we call properly disputation. The second is called demonstrative, the third deliberative, the fourth judicial. And these three last be properly called species or kinds of orations, whose natures shall be declared separately hereafter, with the craft that is required in every one of them. All themes that pertain to logic, either they be simple or compound. As if a man desire to know of me what justice is, this only thing, justice, is my theme. Or if disputation be had in any company upon religion, and I would declare the very nature of religion, my theme should be this simple or one thing, religion. But if it be doubted whether justice be a virtue or not, and I would prove the part affirmative, my theme were now compound, that is to say, justice is a virtue, for it is made of two things, knit or united together, justice and virtue. Here it must be noted that logic is a plain and a sure way to instruct a man of the truth of every thing, and that in it the natures, causes, parts, and effects of things are by certain rules discussed and searched out, so that nothing can be perfectly and properly known but by rules of logic, which is nothing but an observation or a diligent marking of nature, whereby in every thing man's reason doth consider what is first, what last, what proper, and what improper. The places or instruments of a simple theme are the definition of the thing, the parts, the causes, the effects. Example: if thou inquire what thing justice is, whereof it cometh, what parts it hath, and what is the office or effect of every part, then hast thou diligently searched out the whole nature of justice, and handled thy simple theme according to the precepts of logicians, to whom our author leaneth such matters to be discussed of them. Howbeit somewhat the rhetoricians have to do with the simple theme, and as much as shall be for their intent we will show hereafter. For many times the orator must use both definitions and divisions, but as they be in logic plain and compendious, so are they in rhetoric extended and painted with many figures and ornaments, longing to the science. Nevertheless, to satisfy the reader's mind and to alleviate the tediousness of searching these places, I will open the manner and fashion of the handling of the theme aforesaid as plainly as I can after the precepts of logic. First, to search out the perfect knowledge of justice, I go to my first place definition, and fetch from Aristotle in his Ethics the definition of justice, which is this: justice is a moral virtue whereby men be the workers of rightful things, that is to say, whereby they both love and also do such things as be just. This done, I search the cause of justice, that is to say, from whence it took the first beginning, and because that it is a moral virtue, and Plato, in the end of his dialogue, Menon, concludeth that all virtue cometh of God, I am assured that God is the chief cause of justice, declaring it to the world by his instrument man's wit, which the same Plato affirmeth in the beginning of his laws. The definition and cause had, I come to the third place, called parts, to know whether there be but one kind of justice, or else many. And for this purpose I find that Aristotle, in the fifth of his Ethics, divideth justice in two species or kinds, one that he calleth justice legitime or legal, and another which he called equite. Justice legall is that consisteth in the superiours which have power to make or statute lawes to the inferiours, and the office or end of this justice is to make such lawes as be both good and according to right and conscience, and then to declare them, and when they are made and published as they ought to be, to see that they be put in use. For what availeth it to make never so good lawes if they be not observed and kept? And finally, that the maker of the law apply his whole study and mind to the wealth of his subjects and to the common profit of them. The other kind of justice, which men call equite, is whereby a man neither take neither giveth less nor more than he ought, but in giving take the good heed that every man have according as he deserveth. This equite is again divided into equite distributive of common things and equite commutative. By equite distributive is distributed and given of common goods to every man according to his deservings and as he is worthy to have. As to divide among such as long to the church of the church goods after the quality of their merits, and to them that be civil persons of the common treasure of the city according as they are worthy. In this part is comprehended the punishment of misdoers and transgressors of the law, to whom correction must be distributed for the common well according to their demerits, after the prescriptions of the laws of the country, made and determined for the punishment of any manner transgressor. Equite commutative is a just manner in the changing of things from one to another, whose office or effect is to keep just dealing in equity, as buying, selling, and all other bargains lawful. And so are here with the species of justice declared their offices, which was the fourth and last place. Our author also in a great work that he hath made upon rhetoric declareth the handling of a theme simple by the same example of justice, adding two places more which are called affines and contraries on this manner. What is justice? A virtue whereby to every thing is given that to it belongeth. What is the cause thereof? Man's will consenting with laws and manners. How many kinds? 2. Which? Commutative and distributive. For in two manners is our meddling with other men, either in things of our substance and wares, or in gentle and civil conversation. What thing is justice commutative? Right and equity in all contracts. What is justice distributive? Justice of civil living. How manyfold is justice distributive? Either it is common or private. The common is called in Latin pietas, but in English it may be most properly named good order, which is the crown of all virtues conserving honesty and civil conversation of men together, as the heads with the mean commonality in good unite and concord. Private or several justice distributive is honesty and amiable friendship and conversation of neighbors. What are the offices? To do for every man, rich or poor, of whatsoever state he be, and for our country, for our wives, children, and friends, that ought to be done for every of them. Affines or virtues nigh to justice are constancy, liberality, temperance. Things contrary are fear, covetous, prodigality. And this is the manner of handling of a simple theme, dialectual. But yet let not the reader deceive himself, and think that the very perfect knowledge is showed him here. What hath been showed now is somewhat general and brief. More sure and exact knowledge is contained in logic, to whom I will advise them that be studious to resort and to fetch every thing in his one proper faculty. Of a theme compound. Every theme compound, either it is proved true or false. Now whether thou wilt prove or improve any thing, it must be done by argument. And any theme compound, be it logical or rhetorical, it must be referred to the rules of logic by them to be proved true or false. For this is the difference that is between these two sciences, that the logician in disputing observeth certain rules for the setting of his words, being solicitous that there be spoken no more nor no less than the thing requireth, and that it be even as plainly spoken as it is thought. But the rhetorician seeketh about and borroweth when he can, as much as he may for to make the simple and plain logical arguments gay and delectable to the ear. So then the sure judgment of arguments or reasons must be learned of the logician, but the craft to set them out with pleasant figures, and to dilate the matter, longeth to the rhetorician, as in Milo's cause, of whom was made mention afore. A logician would briefly argue, whosoever violently will slay another, may lawfully of the other be slain in his defense. Claudius would violently have slain Milo, wherefore Claudius might lawfully be slain of Milo in Milo's own defense. And this argument the logicians call a syllogism in Dari, which Tully in his oration extendeth that in 4 or 5 leaves it is scant made an end of, nor no man can have knowledge whether Tully's argument that he maketh in his oration for Milo be a good argument or not, and how it holdeth, except he can by logic reduce it to the perfect and brief form of a syllogism, taking in the mean season of the rhetoricians what ornaments have been cast so for to light and augment the oration, and to give it a majesty. The places out of whom are found arguments for the proving or improving of compound themes are these following: definition, cause, parts, like, contrary. Of the places of arguments shall be spoken hereafter. For as touching them in all things the rhetorician and logician do agree. But as concerning the craft to form arguments when thou hast found them in their places, that must be learned of the logician, where he treateth of the form of syllogisms, enthymemes, and inductions. End of section 6. Section 7 of the Art or Craft of Rhetoric. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Amelia Chesley. The Art or Craft of Rhetoric by Leonard COX. Of an Oration Demonstrative. The use of an oration demonstrative is in praise or dispraise, which kind or manner of oration was greatly used sometime in common actions, as doth declare the orations of Demosthenes, and also many of Thucydides' orations. And there ben 3 manners of orations demonstrative. The first containeth the praise or dispraise of persons. As if a man would praise the king's highness, or dispraise some ill person, it must be done by an oration demonstrative. The second kind of an oration demonstrative is, wherein is praised or dispraised not the person, but the deed. As if a thief put himself in jeopardy for the safeguard of a true man, against other thieves and murderers, the person cannot be praised for his vicious living, but yet the deed is worthy to be commended. Or if one should speak of Peter's denying of Christ, he hath nothing to dispraise the person, save only for this deed. The third kind is, wherein is lauded or blamed neither person nor deed, but some other thing, as virtue, vice, justice, injury, charity, envy, patience, wrath, and such like. Parts of an oration. The parts of an oration prescribed of rhetoricians are these: the preamble or exordent, the tale or narration, the proving of the matter or contention, and the conclusion. Of the which parts mention shall be made hereafter in every kind of orations, for they are not found generally in every oration, but some have more parts and some less. Of the preamble. Generally the preamble not alonely in oration demonstrative, but also in the other 2, is contained and must be fetched out of 3 places. that is to say, of benevolence, attention, and to make the matter easy to be known, which the rhetoricians call docility. Benevolence is the place whereby the hearer is made willing to hear us, and it is contained in the thing that we speak of, in them whom we speak to, and in our own person. The easiest and most used place of benevolence consisteth in the office or duty of the person, when we show that it is our duty to do that we be about. Out of this place is set the preamble of St. Gregory Nazianzen, made to the praise of St. Basil, where he saith that it is his duty to praise St. Basil for 3 causes: for the great love and friendship that hath been always between them, and again for the remembrance of the most fair and excellent virtues that were in him, and thirdly, that the church might have an example of a good and holy bishop. Truly, by our author's license, methinketh that in the preamble Nazianzen doth not only take benevolence out of the places of his own person, but also out of the other 2, when he showeth the cause of his duty, for in praising his friend he did but his duty. In praising his virtues he came to the place of benevolence of him that he spake of, as touching the example that the church should have. It was for their profit, and concerning the place of benevolence taken of them that he spake to. But our author regarded chiefly the principal proposition, which was that St. Gregory Nazianzen was bound to praise St. Basil. A like example of benevolence taken out of the place of office or duty is in the oration that Tully made for the poet Archias, which beginneth thus: My lords that be here judges, if there be in me any wit, which I know is but small, or if I have any crafty use of making an oration, wherein I deny not but that I have meetly exercised myself, or if any help to that science cometh out of other liberal arts, in whom I have occupied all my life, surely I am bound to no man more for them than to Archias, which may lawfully, if I may do any man any profit by them, challenge a chief portion for him therein. Out of this place did the same Tully fetch the beginning of his first epistle, in whom he writeth to one Lentul on this manner: I do so my duty in all points toward you, and so great is the love and reverence that I bear unto you, that all other men say that I can do no more, and yet meseemeth that I have never done that I am bound to do, either to you or in your cause. We may also get benevolence by reason of them whom we make our oration of, as if we say that we can never praise him too highly, but that he is worthy much more laud and praise. And so taketh St. Nazianzen benevolence in his said oration for St. Basil. Also of them afore whom we speak, as if we say it is for their profit to laud or praise the person, and that we know very well how much they have always loved him, and that he ought therefore to be praised the more for their sakes. The manner is also to get us benevolence in the preface of our oration, by pinching and blaming of our adversary, as doth Tully in the oration that he made for one Aulus Cecina, wherein he beginneth his poem thus: If temerity and lack of shame could as much prevail in pleas afore the justices, as doth audacity and temerarious boldness in the fields and desert places, there were no remedy, but even so must Aulus Cecina be overcome in this matter by Sextus Abusius impudence, as he was in the field overcome by his insidious audacity. And these be the common forms of benevolence. A man may also fetch his proem out of the nature of the place where he speaketh, as Tully doth in the oration made for Pompeius, for the sending of him into Asia against King Mithridates of Pontus, and King Tigranes of Armenia, on this manner: Howbeit, my lords and masters of this noble city of Rome, I have all times thought it a singular rejoice to me if I might once see you gathered together in a company, to hear some public oration of mine. And again I judge no place to be so ample and so honorable to speak in as this is, etc. Or he may begin at the nature of the time that is then, or at some other circumstance of his matter, as Tully taketh the beginning of his oration for Celius at the time, this wise: If so be it, my lords judges, any man be now present here that is ignorant of your laws, of your process in judgments, and of your customs, surely he may well marvel what so heinous a matter this should be, that it only should be fit upon in an high feast day, when all the commonalty after their old custom are given to the sight of plays, ordained after a perpetual usage for the nuns for them, all matters of the law laid for the time utterly apart. He began also another oration for one Sextus Roscius, out of the danger of the season that he spake in. One may beside these use other manner of proems, which because they are not set out of the very matter itself, or else the circumstances, as in these aforesaid, they are called peregrine or strange proems, and they be taken out of sentences, solemn petitions, manners or customs, laws, statutes of nations and countries. And on this manner doth Aristides begin his oration made to the praise of Rome. Demosthenes, in his oration made against Aeschines, took his preface out of a solemn petition, beseeching the goddess that he might have as good favour in that cause as he had found in all other matters that he had done afore for the commonwealth. In like manner beginneth Tully the oration that he made for one Murena, and also the oration that he made unto the Romans after his return from exile. He beginneth also another oration, which he made as touching a law decreed for the division of fields among the commons out of a custom among them, on this wise. The manner and custom of our old fathers of Rome hath been, etc. And this is the manner of prefaces in any oration, which is also observed in the making of epistles, howbeit there is far less craft in them than is in an oration. There is yet another form and manner to begin by insinuation, wherefore it behoveth to know that insinuation is when in the beginning, if the matter seem not laudable or honest, we find an excuse therefore. Example. Homer in his Iliad describeth one Thersites, that he was most foul and evil favoured of all the Greeks that came to the battle of Troy, for he was both goggle-eyed and lame on the one leg, with crooked and penched shoulders, and a long piked head, bald in very many places. And beside these faults, he was a great foolish babbler, and right foul-mouthed, and full of debate and strife, carrying always against the heads and wise men of the army. Now, if one would take upon him to make an oration to the praise of this losel, which matter is of little honesty in itself, he must use instead of a preface an insinuation, that what thing poets or common fame doth either praise or dispraise ought not to be given credence to, but rather to be suspect. For once it is in the nature of poets to feign and lie, as both Homer and Virgil, which are the princes and heads of all poets, do witness themselves. Of whom Homer saith that poets make many lies, and Virgil saith the most part of the scene is but deceit. Poets have seen bleak fowls under the earth, poets have sinned and made many lies of the pale kingdom of Plato, and of the water of Stygia and the dogs in hell. And again common rumours, how often they been vain. It is so open that it need not to be declared. Wherefore his trust is that the hearers will more regard his saying than feigned fables of poets and flying tales of light folks, which are for the more part the grounders of fame and rumours. An example may be set out of the declamation that Erasmus made to the praise of foolishness. Another example hath the same Erasmus in his second book of Copia, which is this. Plato, in the 5th dialogue of his Communality, willeth that no man shall have no wife of his own, but that every woman shall be common to every man. If any man then would either praise or defend this mind of Plato, which is both contrary to Christ's religion and to the common living of men, he might, as Erasmus teacheth, begin thus. I know very well that this matter which I have determined to speak of will seem unto you at the first hearing not only very strange, but also right abominable. But that notwithstanding, if it will please you a little while to defer your judgment till ye have heard the sum of such reasons as I will bring forth in the cause, I doubt nothing but that I shall make the truth so evident that you all will with one assent approve it, and knowledge that ye have been hitherto marvellously deceived in your opinion. And somedel to alleviate your minds, ye shall understand that I am not myself author of the thing, but is the mind and saying of the excellent and most highly named philosopher Plato, which was undoubted so famous a clerk, so discreet a man, and so virtuous in all his deeds, that ye may be sure he would speak nothing but it were on right perfect ground, and that the thing were of itself very expedient, though peradventure it show for otherwise at the first hearing. In all prefaces or preambles must be good heed taken that they be not too far set, nor too long. These affectuous words, I rejoice, I am sorry, I marvel, I am glad for your sake, I desire, I fear, I pray God, and such other like, be very apt for a preface. Of the second place of a preface called attention. The hearers shall be made attent or diligent to give audience if the orator make promise that he will show them new things, or else necessary or profitable, or if he say that it is an hard matter that he hath in handling, or else obscure and not easy to be understood, except they give right good attendance. Wherefore it is expedient that if they will have the perception of it, that they give a good ear. But as concerning the newness or profit of the matter, it maketh not all only the hearer to give a good ear, which thing is called attention, but also it maketh him well willing to be present, which is benevolence. Docility. Docility, whereby we make the matter plain and easy to be perceived, is not greatly required in this kind of oration, for it is belonging properly to dark and obscure causes, in which we must promise that we will not use great ambages, or to go, as men say, round about the bush, but to be short and plain. Of narration, which is the second part of an oration. The narration or tale wherein persons are praised is the declaring of their life and doings after the fashion of an history. The places out of which it is sought are the person's birth, his childhood, his adolescency, his man's state, his old age, his death, and what followeth after. In his birth is considered of what stock he came, what chanced at the time of his nativity or nigh upon, as in the nativity of Christ shepherds heard angels sing. In his childhood are marked his bringing up, and tokens of wisdom coming, as Horace in his fourth satire showeth how in his childhood his father taught him by examples of such as were then living to flee from vice and to give himself to virtue. In adolescence is considered whereto he then giveth himself, as in the first comedy of Terence one Simo telleth his servant Sophia, that though all young men for the more part give themselves to some peculiar thing, wherein they set their chief delight, as some to have goodly horses, some to cherish hounds for hunting, and some are given only to their books, his son Pamphilus loved none of these more one than another, and yet in all these he exercised himself measurably. In man's state and old age is noted what office or rule he bare among his citizens, or in his country, what acts he did, how he governed such as were under him, how he prospered, and what fortune he had in such things as he went about. Example hereof is in Sallust, which compareth together Cato and Caesar, saying that both their stock, age, and eloquence were almost like and egal. Their excellency and greatness of spirit and wit was also like and egal. And like fame and worship had they both attained, howbeit not by a like way. Caesar was had in great estimation for his benefits and liberality. Cato had gotten him a name for his perfect and upright living. Caesar was praised for his gentleness and pity. Cato was honored for his earnestness and surety. The t'other won much bruit by giving large gifts, by helping such as were in distress, and by forgiving of trespasses done against him. Cato's fame did spread because he would neither be forgiven of none offense, neither forgive none other, but as any man had deserved, so to cause him to be dealt with. In the one was great refuge to such as were in misery. In the other was sore punishment and pernition to misdoers and evil transgressors of the law. Briefly to conclude, it was all Caesar's mind and pleasure to labor diligently night and day in his friends' causes, to care less for his own business than theirs, to deny nothing that was worthy to be asked. His desire was evermore to be in war, to have a great host of men under his governance, that by his noble and hardy facts his valiantness might be the more known and spread abroad. Contrarily, all Cato's study was on temperance, and to do in no manner otherwise than was convenient and fitting for such a man as he was, and chiefly he set his mind to severity. He never made no comparison with the rich man in richesse, nor with the mighty man in power, but if need required, with the hardy man in boldness, with the temperate in moderation, with the good man in innocency and just dealing. He cared not for the name, it was sufficient to him to have the deed, and so the less he cared for glory, the more always he obtained. Many such comparisons, very profitable for this intent, are also in Plutarch in his book of Noble Men's Lives. A goodly ensample of this place is in the oration that Hermolaus Barbarus made to the Emperor Frederic and Maximilian his son, which, for because it is so long, I let it pass. A like ensample is in Tully's oration that he made to the people of Rome for Pompeius to be sent against Mithridates. Some there be that divide the laudes of persons into 3 kindes of goodes, beginning the narration at them, which thing our author doth not greatly commend, but rather in rehearsing of any person's deeds if there cannot be kept an order of history, and many things must be spoken. It were after his mind best to touch first his acts done by prudence, and next by justice, thirdly by fortitude of the mind, and last by temperance, and so to gather the narration out of this 4 cardinal virtues. As if one should praise St. Austin, after that he hath spoken of his parentele and bringing up in youth, and is come to the rehearsal of his acts, they may be conveniently distributed into the places of virtues. On this manner did Tully praise Pompey. I suppose, saith he, that in a him that should be a head captain over a great army ought to be 4 things: knowledge of war, valiantness, authority, and felicity. Here is to be noted that in rehearsing any person's acts, we may have our chief respect to some peculiar and principal virtue in him, enlarging and exalting it by amplification in manner of a digression. Our author in this work maketh no mention of the last place, that is death, and such things as follow after. But in another greater work he declareth it thus briefly: the death of the person hath also his praises, as of such which have been slain for the defense of their country or prince. A very goodly ensample for the handling of this place is in an epistle that Angel Paulician writeth in his 4th book of epistles to James Antiquary of Lawrence Medicis, how wisely and devoutly he disposed himself in his deathbed, and of his departing, and what chanced at that time. And so to conclude, an oration demonstrative, wherein persons are lauded, is an historical exposition of all his life in order, and there is no difference between this kind and an history, save that in histories we be more brief, and use less curiosity. Here all things be augmented and coloured with as much ornaments of eloquence as can be had. Confirmation of our purpose, and confuting or reproving of the contrary, which are the parts of contention, are not requisite in this kind of oration. For here are not treated any doubtful matters to whom contention pertaineth. Nevertheless, sometime it happeneth, howbeit it is seldom, that a doubt may come which must be either defended or at the least excused. Example: the French men in old time made mighty war against the Romans, and so sore besieged them that they were by compulsion constrained to fall to composition with the French men for an huge sum of gold, to be paid to them for the breaking of the siege. But being in this extreme misery, they sent for one Camillus, whom not very long afore they had banished out of the city, and in his absence made him dictator, which was the chiefest dignity among the Romans, and of so great authority that for the space of 3 months, for so long dured the office most conveniently, he might do all thing at his pleasure, whether it concerned death or no, for no man so hardy once to say nay against any thing that he did, so that for the space he was as a king, having all in his own mere power. Now it chanced that while this sum was in paying, and not fully weighed, Camillus, of whom I said afore that being in exile he was made dictator, came with an army, and anon bade cease of the payment, and that each party should make ready to battle, and so he vanquished the French men. Now if one should praise him of his noble fates, it should seem that this was done contrary to the law of arms, to defeat the French men of the ransom due to them, since the compact was made afore, wherefore it is necessary for the orator to defend this deed, and to prove that he did nothing contrary to equity. For the which purpose he hath 2 places, one apparent, which is a common saying usurped of the poet Delos an viris quis in ofte requirat, that is to say, who will search whether the deed of enemy against enemy be either guile or pure valiantness. But for that in war law is as well to be kept as in other things. This saying is but of a feeble ground. The other is of a more strong assurance, which Titus Livius writeth in his 5th book from the building of Rome, where he rehearseth this history now mentioned, and that answer is this, that the compact was made to pay the foresaid ransom after that Camillus was created dictator, at what time it was not lawful that they which were of far less authority, yea, and had put themselves wholly in his hand, should intermeddle them with any manner of treaties without his license, and that he was not bound to stand to their bargain. The which argument is deduct out of 2 circumstances, whereof one is the time of the making of the compact, and the other the persons that made it, which 2 circumstances may briefly be called when and who. Likewise, if an oration should be made to the laud of St. Peter, it behoveth to excuse his denying of Christ, that it was rather of divine power and will than otherwise, for a comfortable example to sinners of grace if they repent. This is the manner of handling of an oration demonstrative in which the person is praised. The author in his greater work declareth the fashion by this example. If one would praise King Charles, he should keep in his oration this order. First, in declaring his parentele, that he was King Pepin's son, which was the first of all kings of France, named the most Christian king, and by whom all after him had the same name, and nephew to Martel, the most valiantest prince that ever was. Next, his bringing up under one Peter Pesane, of whom he was instruct both in Greek and Latin. Then his adolescency, which he passed in exercise of arms under his father in the wars of Aquitaine, where he learned also the Sarrazine's tongue. Being come to man's state, and now king of France, he subdued Aquitaine, Italy, Suaveland, and the Saxons, and these wars were so fortunate that he overcame his adversaries more by authority and wisdom than by effusion of blood. Also many other notable examples of virtue were in him in that age, especially that he edified the University of Paris. Here may by digression be declared how goodly a thing learning is in princes. Chiefly such condition appertaineth to virtue and a good living. Here may be also made comparison of his virtues in war, and of other agreeing with peace, in the which, as his history maketh mention, he was more excellent. For his chief delight was to have peace, and again he was so gentle and so merciful that he would rather save even such as had done him great offence and had deserved very well for to die than to destroy them, though he might do it conveniently. Beside this, he was so greatly inflamed in the love of God and his holy church, that one Alcuin, a noble clerk of England, was continually with him, in whose preaching and other ghostly communication he had chief pleasure. His old age he passed in rest and quietness, fortunately, save for one thing, that his sons agreed evil between them. After his decease reigned his son, holy Saint Louis, and so the followings of his death were such that they could be no better, and a very great token of his good and virtuous living. For if an ill tree can bring forth no good fruit, what shall we suppose of this noble King Charles, of whom came so virtuous and so holy a son? Truly methinks that hither may be not inconveniently applied the sayings of the Gospel, by their fruits ye shall know them. Of an oracion demonstrative, wherein an act is praised. When we will praise any manner of deed, the most apt preamble for that purpose shall be to say that the matter pertaineth to the commodities of them which hear us. Example. When the Romans had expelled their king, whom the historians call Tarquin the Proud, out of the city, and fully enacted that they would never have king to reign more over them, this Tarquinius went for aid and succour to the king of Tuscae, which when he could by no means entreat the Romans to receive again their king, he came with all his puissance against the city, and there long space besieged the Romans, by reason whereof great penury of wheat was in the city. And the king of Tuscae had great trust that, continuing the siege, he should within a little longer space compel the Romans through famine to yield themselves. In the mean season, a young man of the city named Caius Mucius came to the senators and showed them that he was purposed, if they would give him license, to go forth of the city to do an act that should be for their great profit and wealth. Whereupon, when he had obtained license, privily, with weapon hid under his vesture, he came to the Tuscans' camp, and got him among the thickest nigh to the tent where as the king sat with his chancellor, paying the soldiers their wages. And by cause that they were almost of like apparel, and also the chancellor spake many things as a man being in authority, he could not tell whether of them was the king, nor he durst not ask, lest his demand would have bewrayed him. For as for language they had one, and nothing was different. For both Tuscans and Romans were all of Italy, as in times past. England hath had many kings, though the language and people were one. And thus being in doubt whether of them he might step unto, by chance he strike the chancellor instead of the king, and slew him. Wherefore when he was taken and brought before the king, for to punish his hand that had failed in taking one for another, and again to show the king how little he cared for his menaces, he thrust his hand into the fire, which at that time was there prepared for sacrifice, and there in the flame let it burn, not once moving it. The king, greatly marvelling at his audacity and hardy nature, commended him greatly thereof, and bade him go his way free. For the which, as though he would make the king a great amends, he feigned that 300 of the noblest young men of Rome had conspired together in like manner, every one after another unawares to slay him, and all to put their bodies and lives in hazard, till time should chance that one might achieve their intent. For fear whereof the king forthwith fell at an appointment with the Romans and departed. The young man afterward was named Scaevola, which is as much to say in English as left-handed. For as I have rehearsed afore, he brent his right hand, so that he had lost the use thereof. If any orator would in an oration commend this deed, he might conveniently make the preface on this fashion. There is no doubt, my lords and masters of Rome, but that the remembrance of Scaevola's name is very pleasant unto your audience, which with one act that he did endowed your city with many and great commodities, etc. This manner of preface is most convenient and best annexed to such manner of orations demonstratives. Nevertheless, it is lawful for us to take our preface, if it be our pleasure, out of some circumstance, as out of the place that our oration is made in, or out of the time that we spake in, or else otherwise according as we shall have occasion. As Tully in the oration that he made for the restitution of Marcus Marcellus, in the which he praiseth Cæsar for the calling home of the said Marcus Marcellus out of exile. He taketh his preamble out of the time and Cæsar's person, beginning thus: This day, my lords senators, hath made an end of the long silence that I have kept a great while, not for any fear that I had, but part for great sorrow that was in me, and partly for shame. This day, as I said, hath taken away that long silence, yea, and beside that, of new brought to me lust and mind to speak what I would, and what I thought most expedient, like as I was afore wont to do. For I cannot in no manner of wise refrain, but I must needs speak of the great meekness of Cæsar, of the graciousness that is in him, so abundant and so great withal, that never afore any such hath been wont to be seen or heard of, and also of the excellent good moderation of all things which is in him that hath all in his own mere power. Nor I cannot let pass this excellent, incredible, and divine wisdom unspoken of afore you at this time. Of the narration. In this kind we use but seldom whole narrations, unless we make our oration afore them that know not the history of the act or deed which we be about to praise. But instead of a narration, we use a proposition on this manner. Among all the noble deeds, Cæsar, that you have done, there is none that is more worthy to be praised than this restitution of Marc Marcel. Of confirmation, which is the first part of contention. The places of confirmation are honesty, profit, lightness or hardness of the deed. For after the prohem of the oration and the narration, then go we to the proving of our matter. First showing that it was a very honest deed, and next that it was not all only honesty, but also profitable. Thirdly, as concerning the easiness or difficulty, the praise thereof must be considered, part in the doer and part in the deed. An easy deed deserveth no great praise, but an hard and an jeopardous thing, the sooner and the lightlier it is achieved, the more it is to be lauded. The honesty of the cause is fet from the nature of the thing that is spoken of, which place lieth in the wit of the orator, and may also be fet out of the philosophers' books. It is also copiously declared of rhetoricians, and very compendiously handled of Erasmus in his book, entitled Of the Manner and Craft to make Epistles, in the chapter of a persuading epistle. The profit of the deed, or the commodity may be set at the circumstance of it. Circumstances are these: what was done, who did it, when, where it was done, among whom, and by whose help. As if one would praise Scaevolas' act, of the which mention was made afore. He may, when he cometh to the places of contention, shew first how honest a deed it is for any man to put his life in jeopardy for the defense of his country, which is so much the more to be commended that it came of his own mind, and not by the instigation of any other, and how profitable it was to the city to remove so strong and so puissant an enemy by so good and crafty policy. What time the city was not well assured of all men's minds that were within the walls, considering that but a little afore many noble young men were detected of treason in the same business. And then also the city was almost destitute of vitals, and all other commodities necessary for the defense. Likewise, easiness or difficulty are contained in the circumstances of the cause, as in the example now spoken of. What an hard enterprise it is for one man to enter into a king's army, and to come to the king's pavilion in the face of his soldiers, to adventure to slay him. Of the second part of contention, called confutation. Confutation is the foiling of such arguments as may be induced against our purpose, which part is but little used in an oration demonstrative. Nevertheless, sometime may chance a thing that must be either defended or else at the least excused. As if any man would speak of Camillus' deed whereby he recovered his country and delivered it from the hands of the Frenchmen. Here must be declared that the bargain made afore was not by Camillus violate. Of the conclusion. The conclusion is made of a brief enumeration of such things that we have spoken of afore in the oration, and in moving of affections. In delectable things, or such things that have been well done, we move our audience to rejoice thereat, and to do like. In sad things and heavy, to be sorry for them. In ill and perverse acts, to beware that they follow not them to their great shame and confusion. Of an oration demonstrative, wherein are praised neither persons nor acts, but some other thing, as religion, matrimony, or such other. The best beginning will be if it be taken out of some high praise of the thing. But a man may also begin otherwise, either at his own person, or at theirs afore whom he speaketh, or at the place in the which he speaketh, or at the season present, or otherwise, as hath afore been specified. And here must we take good heed that if we take upon us to praise any thing that is not praiseworthy, then must we use insinuation, and excuse the turpitude, either by examples or by arguments, as Erasmus doth in his epistle prefixed afore his oration made to the praise of foolishness, of which I have let pass the translation, because the epistle is somewhat long. The narration. In this manner of oration is no narration, but instead thereof the rhetoricians all only propose the matter, and this proposition is in the stead of the narration. A very elegant example is in the oration that Angel Politiane made to the Laude of Histories, which is this: Among all manner of writers by whom either the Greek tongue or the Latin hath been in flower and excellence, without doubt me seemeth that they did most profit to mankind, by whom the excellent deeds of nations, princes, or valiant men have been truly described and put in chronicles. Likewise, if a man praise peace, and show what a commodious thing it is, he may make such a proposition. Among all the things which pertain to man's commodity, of whatsoever condition or nature soever they be, none is so excellent and so worthy to be had in honor and love as is peace. The confirmation. The places of confirmation be in this oration the same that were in the other, of whom mention was made afore: honesty, profit, easiness, or difficulty. Honesty is considered in the nature of the thing, also in the persons that have exercised it, and the inventors thereof, and in the author of it. As in the Laude of Matrimony be considered the author thereof, which was God himself, the antiquity that was made in this first beginning of the world, and continued, as reason is, to this hour in great honor and reverence. The persons that have used it were both patriarchs, as Abraham, prophets, as David, apostles, as Saint Peter, martyrs, Saint Eustace, and confessors, as Saint Edward. And, which thing was first proposed, the nature thereof is such that without it man should be like unto beast, unless all generation should be put apart, and the commandment of Almighty God not regarded, who bade man and woman should engender and multiply. Profit and easiness is considered in the circumstances. Examples may be taken out of Polycian's orations, made to the Laude of Histories, and 2 orations of Erasmus, one to the Laude of Physic, and the other to the Laude of Matrimony. Of confutation. Confutation hath contrary places to confirmation. Of the conclusion. The period or conclusion standeth in the brief enumeration of things spoken afore, and in moving the affections as hath been above expressed. End of section 7. Section 8 of the Art or Craft of Rhetoric. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Amelia Chesley. The Art or Craft of Rhetoric by Leonard COX. Of an Oracion Deliberative. An oration deliberative is by the which we persuade or dissuade anything, and by the which we ask or whereby we exhort any man to do a thing or else to forsake it. And this kind of oration is much in use, not only in civil matters, but also in epistles. Of the preamble. We may begin our oration in this kind, even like as we did in an oration demonstrative, but most aptly at our office or duty, lest some men would think that we did it more of a private affection, for our own commodity and pleasure, than for any other man's profit. And in this manner Sallust in his book of Cathline bringeth in Caesar beginning an oration. But let us hear now what Caesar saith. All men, my lords, senators, which sit counselling upon any doubtful matter, must be void of hatred, friendship, anger, pity, or mercy. For where any of these things bear a rule, man's mind cannot lightly perceive the truth, etc. Or else we may begin at the greatness of the matter, or danger of the thing that we speak of, as in the first book of Livius, Camillus makes the preamble of his oration thus. My masters of this city of Ardea, which have been always mine old friends, and now, by reason of mine exile out of Rome, my new neighbours and citizens. For I thank you of your goodness, you have promised that it should so be, and on the other side my fortune hath constrained me to seek some new dwelling out of the city where I was brought up and inhabited. I would not that any of you should think that I am now come among you, not remembering my condition and state, but the common jeopardy that we be all now in will compel every man to open and show the best remedy that he knoweth for our succour in this great fear and necessity. Notwithstanding this, a man may take his beginning otherwise, after any of the fashions afore recited, if he list. Tully, in the oration wherein he advised the Romans to make Pompey their chief captain against Mithridates and Tigranes, kings of Pontus and Armeny, taketh in the preface benevolence from his own person, showing by what occasion he might lawfully give counsel to the Romans, because he was elect praetor of the city. We may also touch our adversaries in the preface, or else we may touch the manners either of some several persons, or of the commons in general, as in the oration that Porcius Cato made against the sumptuousness of the women of Rome, thus. If every man, my lords and masters of this city, would observe and keep the right and majesty of a man against his own wife, we should have far less encumbrance now with the whole throng than we have. But now our freedom and liberty is overcome within our own doors by the importunateness of our wives, and so audacity taken thereof here trodden under the feet and oppressed in the Parliament House. And because we would not displease no man his own wife at home, here are we now cumbered withal, gathered together on a heap, and brought in that taking that we dare not once open our lips against them, etc. We may also begin at the nature of the time that we speak in, or at the nature of the place, or at any other circumstance or thing incident. As Livius, in the 9th book of his 4th decade against the feasts that the Romans kept in the honour of the idolous god Bacchus, beginneth his oration at praying on this wise. The solemn making of prayers unto the gods was never so apt, nor yet so necessary in any oration as it is in this, which shall show and admonish you that they be very and right gods whom our elders have ordained to be worshipped, adored, and prayed unto. Briefly, in all prefaces belonging to orations deliberatives, the office of the person and the necessity or commodity of the matter that we treat of are considered. The narration. In orations deliberatives we use very seldom narration, But for the more part, instead of them, we make a brief proposition containing the sum of our intent. As nowadays nothing is so necessary as to labour to bring these dissensions that be in the church to a perfect unity and concord, that according to Christ's sayings there be but one shepherd and one fold. Nevertheless, we use sometime brief narrations, when that something hath been done already of that we give our counsel upon, as in the above said oration that Tully made for Pompey, where he maketh this narration. Great and very perilous war is made both against your tributors, and also them that both confederate with you, and by you called your fellows, which war is moved by two right mighty kings, Mithridates and Tigranes, etc. After this manner is a narration in the oration that Hannibal made to Scipio, and is contained in the 10th book of the 3rd decade of Livius, right proper and elegant, without any preface, beginning his narration thus: If it hath been ordained by my fortune and destiny that I, which first of all the Carthaginois began war with the Romans, and which have almost had the victory so often in mine hands, should now come of mine own mind to ask peace, I am glad that fortune hath prepared that I should ask it of you specially. And among all your noble lands, this shall not be one of the least that Hannibal gave over to you, to whom the gods had given afore that victory over so many captains of the Romans, and that it was your luck to make an end of this war, in the which the Romans have had far more evil chances than we of Carthagin. And whether it were my destiny or chance that ought me to this scornful shame, I, which began the war when your father was consul, and after joined battle with him when he was made captain of the Romans' army, must now come unarmed to his son to ask peace of him. It had been best for both parties if it had pleased the gods to have sent our forefathers that mind that you of Rome would have been content with the empire of Italy, and we Carthaginois with Africa. For neither Sicil nor Sardinia can be any sufficient amends to either of us, for so many navies, so many armies, so many and so excellent captains lost in our wars between us. But things past may sooner be blamed than mended. We of Carthagine, as touching our part, have so coveted other dominions, that at length we had business enough to defend our possessions. Nor the war hath not been only with you in Italy, or with us only in Africa, but at the pleasure of fortune sometimes here and some there, in so much that you, my masters of Rome, have seen the standards and armies of your enemies hard at your walls and gates of the city, and we on the other side have heard the noise out of your camps into our city. After the narration ought to follow immediately the proposition of our counsel or advice. As after the narration of Hannibal afore rehearsed, followeth the proposition of his purpose thus: That thing is now entreated while fortune is favourable unto you, that we ought most to abhor, and you surely ought above all things to desire, that is, to have peace. And it is most for the profit of us too, which have the matter in handling that peace be had. And sure we be that whatsoever we agree upon, our cities will ratify the same. Next followeth the confirmation of those things that we intend to persuade, which must be fet out of the places of honesty, profit, easiness, of difficulty. As if we will persuade anything to be done, we shall show that it is not only honest and laudable, but also profitable and easy enough to perform. Or if we cannot choose but grant that it is hard, yet we shall show that it is so honest a deed, so worthy praise, and besides so great commodity will come thereof, that the hardness ought in no wise to fear us, but rather be as an instigation to take the thing on hand, remembering the Greek proverb, Sine nola ta nala, that is to say, all excellent and commendable things be hard and of difficulty. In honesty are comprehended all virtues, as wisdom, justice, due love to God and to our parents, liberality, pity, constance, temperance. And therefore he that will for the confirming of his purpose declare and prove that it is honest and commendable that he intendeth to persuade him, behoveth to have perfect knowledge of the nature of virtues. and also to have in ready remembrance sentences both of scripture and of philosophy, as orators and poets, and beside these, examples of histories for garnishing of his matters. As concerning the place of utility, we must in all causes look if we may have any arguments, whereby we may prove that our counsel is of such necessity that it cannot be chosen, but they must needs follow it. For those arguments be of far greater strength than they that do but only prove the utility of the matter. But if we can have no such necessary reasons, then we must search out arguments to prove our mind to be profitable by circumstances of the cause. In like manner to persuade a thing by the easiness thereof, or dissuade it by the difficulty of the thing, we must have respect to possibility or impossibility, for these proofs are of stronger nature than the other, and he that will show that a thing may be done easily must presuppose the possibility thereof. As he on the other side that will persuade a thing not to be done, if he show and manifest that it is impossible, argueth more strongly than if he could but only prove difficulty in it. For, as I said afore, many things of difficulty yet may be the rather to be taken in hand, that they may get them that achieve them the greater fame and praise. And these arguments be fet out of the circumstances of the cause, that is to say, the time, the place, the doers, the thing itself, the means whereby it should be done, the causes wherefore it should be done or not, the helps or impediments that may be therein. In this purpose, examples of histories are of great efficacy. The confutation is the foiling and refelling of other men's sayings that have or might be brought against our purpose, wherefore it consisteth in places contrary to the places of confirmation, as in proving the saying of the contrary part, neither to be honest nor profitable, nor easy to perform, or else utterly impossible. The conclusion standeth in two things, that is to say, a brief and compendious repeating of all our reasons that we have brought for us afore, and in moving of affections. And so doth Ulysses conclude his oration on the 13th book of Ovid Metamorphosis. End of section 8. Section 9 of the Art or Craft of Rhetoric. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Amelia Chesley. The Art or Craft of Rhetoric by Leonard COX. Of the third kind of orations called Judiciall. Orations judicial be that long to controversies in the law and pleas, which kind of oration in old time longed only to judges and men of law, but now for the more part is neglect of them, though there be nothing more necessary to quicken them in crafty and wise handling of their matters. In these orations the first is to find out the state of the cause, which is a short proposition, containing the whole effect of all the controversies. As in the oration of Tully made for Milo, of the which I made mention in the beginning of my book. The state of the cause is this. Milo slew Claudius lawfully, which thing his adversaries denied. And if Tully can prove it, the plea is won. Here must be borne away that there be three manner of states in such orations. The first is called conjectural, the second legitim, the third judicial, and every of these hath his own proper places to fet out arguments of them, wherefore they shall be spoken of severally. And first we will treat of state conjectural, which is used when we be certain that the deed is done, but we be ignorant who did it, and yet by certain conjectures we have one suspect that of very likelihood it should be he that hath committed the crime. And therefore this state is called conjectural, because we have no manifest proof, but all only great likelihoods, or as the rhetoricians call them, conjectures. Example. There was a great contention in the Greeks' army afore Troy between Ulysses and Ajax, after the death of Achilles, which of them should have his armor, as next to the said Achilles in valiantness. In which controversy, when the Greeks had judged the said armor unto Ulysses, Ajax, for very great disdain, fell out of his mind, and shortly after, in a wood nigh to the host, after he had known, when he came again to himself, what foolish pranks he had played in the time of his frenzy, for sorrow and shame he slew himself. Soon upon this deed came Ulysses by, which seeing Ajax thrust through with a sword, came to him, and as he was about to put out the sword, the friends of Ajax chanced to come the same way, which seeing their friend dead, and his old enemy pulling out a sword of his body, they accused him of murder. In very deed here was no proof, for of truth Ulysses was not guilty in the cause. Nevertheless, the envy that was between Ajax and him made the matter to be not a little suspect, specially for that he was found there with the said Ajax alone, wherefore the state of the plea was conjectural, whether Ulysses slew Ajax or not. The Preface. The preface is here even as it is in other orations, for we begin according to the nature of the cause that we have on hand, either in blaming our adversary, or else moving the hearers to have pity on our client, or else we begin at our own person, or at the praise of the judge, etc. The narration. The narration or tale is the showing of the deed in manner of an history, wherein the accuser must craftily intermingle many suspicions which shall seem to make his matter provable. As Tully in his oration for Milo, where in his narration he intended by certain conjectures to show that Clodius lay in wait for Milo, he in his said narration handleth that place thus. In the mean season, when Clodius had knowledge that Milo had a lawful and necessary journey to the city of Lavine, the 13th day afore the calendus of March, to point who should be head priest there, which thing longed to Milo because he was dictator of that town. Clodius suddenly the day afore departed out of Rome to set upon Milo in a lordship of his own, as after was well perceived. And such haste he made to be going, that whereas the people were gathered the same day for matters wherein also he had great ado himself, and very necessary it had been for him to have been there, yet this notwithstanding all other things apart, he went his way, which you may be sure he would never have done, save only that he had fully determined to prevent a time and place convenient for his malicious intent afore Milo's coming. In this piece of Tully's narration are intermingled, first, that Clodius knew of Milo's going, which maketh the matter suspect that Clodius went afore to meet with him. For this was well known afore that Clodius bare Milo great grudge and malice. Next is shewed the place whereas Clodius met Milo, which also giveth a great suspicion, for it was nigh Clodius's place, where he might soon take succour, and the t'other was in least assurance. Thirdly, that he departed out of the city, what time it had been most expedient, yea, and also greatly requisite for him to have been at home. And that again maketh the matter suspect, for surely he would not, as Tully himself saith, in no wise have been absent at such a busy time, unless it had been for some great purpose, and what other should it seem than to slay Milo? As surely evident it was that they buckled together, and this was well known that Milo had a necessary cause to go forth of Rome at that time. Contrarily, in Clodius could be perceived none other occasion to depart than out of the city, but of likelihood to lie in wait for Milo. The proposition. Out of the narration must be gathered a brief sentence wherein shall stand the whole pith of the cause, for rhetoricians put incontinent after the narration division, which is a part of contention, and doth briefly show wherein the controversy doth stand, or what things shall be spoken of in the oration. This division is divided into sejunction and distribution. Sejunction is when we show wherein our adversaries and we agree, and what it is whereupon we strive. As they that pleaded Clodius's cause against Milo might on this manner have used sejunction. That Milo slew Clodius, our adversaries can not deny, but whether he might so do lawfully or not is our controversy. Distribution is the proposition wherein we declare of what things we will speak, of which if we propose how many they be, it is called enumeration, but if we do not express the number, it is called exposition. Example of both is had in the oration that Tully made to the people that Pompeius might be made chief captain of the wars against Mithridates and Tigranes, where after the preface and narration he maketh his proposition by exposition thus: First, I think it expedient to speak of the nature and kind of this war, and after that of the greatness thereof, and then to show how an head or chief captain of any army should be chosen. Which last member of his exposition he again distributeth into 4 parts, thus as followeth. Truly this is mine opinion, that he which shall be a governor of an host ought to have these 4 properties in him. The first is that he have perfect knowledge of all such things as longeth to war. The second is that he be a man of his hands. The third, that he be a man of such authority that his dignity may cause his soldiers to have him in reverence and awe. The fourth is that he be fortunate and lucky in all things that he goeth about. Tully in the oration for Milo proposeth all only showing wherein the controversy of the plea did stand on this manner, as followeth. Is there anything else that must be tried and judged in this cause save this, whether of them both began the fray and intended to murder the t'other? No, surely. So that if it can be founden that Milo went about to destroy Claudius, then he be punished therefore accordingly. But if it can be proved that Claudius was the beginner and laid wait for to slay Milo, and so was the searcher of his own death, and that what Milo did it was but to defend himself from the treason of his enemy, and the safeguard of his life, that then he may be delivered and quit. Of confirmation. The confirmation of the accuser is fetched out of these places will and power. For these 2 things will cause the person that is accused to be greatly suspect that he had will to do the thing that he is accused of, and that he might well enough bring it to pass. To prove that he had will thereto, you must go to 2 places. The one is the quality of the person, and the other is the cause that moved him to the deed. The quality of the person is thus handled. For to look what is his name or surname, and if it be naughty to say that he had it not for nothing, but that nature had such prim power in men to make them give names according to the manners of every person. Then next to behold his country. So Tully in his oration made for Lucius Flaccus, to improve the witness that was brought against him by Greeks, layeth unto them the lightness of their country. This, saith Tully, do I say of the whole nation of Greeks. I grant to them that they have good learning and the knowledge of many sciences. Nor I deny not but that they have a pleasant and marvellous sweet speech. They are also people of high and excellent quick wit, and thereto they be very facundious. These and such other qualities wherein they boost themselves greatly, I will not repine against it that they bear the mastery therein. But as concerning equity and good conscience requisite in bearing of record or giving of any witness, and also as touching faithfulness of word and promise, truly this nation never observed this property, neither they knew not what is the strength, authority, and weight thereof. So to Englishmen is attributed sumptuousness in meats and drinks, to the Frenchmen pride and delight in new fantasies, to Flemings and Almains great drinking and yet inventive wits, to Britons, Gascons, and Polons larceny, to Spaniards agility, to Italians high wit and much subtlety, to Scots boldness, to Irishmen hastiness, to Bohems valiantness and tenacity of opinions, etc. After that, to look on his kindred, as if his father or mother or other kin were of ill disposition, for as the tree is, such fruit it beareth. On this wise doth Philus entwit Demophon, that his father Theseus uncourteously and traitorously left his love Ariadne alone in the desert isle of Naxos, and contrary to his promise, steal from her by night, adding heredem patria perfidi fraudis agis, that is to say, untrue and false forsworn man, thou playest kindly thy father's hair in deceitable beguiling of thy true lover. After that we must look upon the sex, whether it be a man or woman that we accuse, to see if any argument can be deduct out of it to our purpose. As in men is noted audacity, women be commonly timorous. Then next the age of the person, as in Terence Simo speaketh of his son Pamphilus, saith unto his man called Socia, how couldest thou know his conditions or nature afore, while his age and fear and his maister did let it to be known? Hypermestra in Ovid's epistles joineth these two places of sex and age together thus: I am a woman and a young maiden, mild and gentle, both by nature and years. My soft hands are not apt to fierce battles. After these follow strength of body or agility, and quickness of wit, out of which may be brought many reasons to affirm our purpose. So Tully in his oration for Milo, willing to prove that Claudius was the beginner of the fray, showeth that Milo, which was never wont but to have men about him, by chance at that time, had in his company certain musicians and maidens that waited on his wife, whom he had sitting with him in his wagon. Contrarily, Claudius, that was never wont afore but to ride in a wagon and to have his wife with him, at that time rode forth on horseback. And whereas afore he was always accustomed to have knaves and queens in his company, he had then none but tall men with him, and, as who should say, men piked out for the nonnes. To this is added form, as to assay if we can have any argument to our purpose out of the person's face or countenance. And so doth Tully argue in his oration against Piso, saying on this wise: Seest thou not now, thou beast? Dost thou not now perceive what is men's complaint on thy visage? There is none that complaineth that I wot not what Surrien and of their flock, which be but newly crept up to honour out of the dunghill, is now made consul of the city. For this servile colour hath not deceived us, nor hairy cheek–balls, nor rotten and filthy teeth, thine eyes, thy brows, forehead, and whole countenance, which in a manner doth manifest men's conditions and nature, it hath deceived us. This done, we must consider how he hath been brought up, that we accuse among whom he hath lived, and whereby, how he governeth his household, and assay if we can pick out of these aught for our purpose. Also of what state he is of, free or bond, rich or poor, bearing office or not, a man of good name or otherwise, wherein he delighteth most, which places do express man's living, and by his living his will and mind, as I would declare more fully, save that in introductions men must labour to be short, and again they are such that he that hath any perceiving may soon know what shall make for his purpose, and how to set it forth. And therefore this shall suffice as touching the quality of the person. If we bear away this for a general rule, that what maketh for the accuser evermore the contrary, is sure state for the defender, if he can prove it or make it of the more likelihood. As Tully in defending Milo layeth to Claudius's friends charges that he had none about him but chosen men. And for to clear Milo he sheweth the contrary, that he had with him singing lads and women servants that waited on his wife, which maketh it of more likelihood that Claudius went about to slay Milo than Milo him. The cause that moveth to the mischief lieth in two things, in natural impulsion and ratiocination. Natural impulsion is anger, hatred, covetous, love, or such other affections. So Simo in Terence, when he had said that Davus, whom he had pointed to wait upon his son Pamphilus, would do all that might lie in him both with hand and foot, rather than to displease him, than to please Pamphilus' mind. And Socia demanded why he would do so. Simo made answer by ratiocination, saying, "Dost thou ask that? Marry his ungracious and unhappy mind is the cause thereof." Onan in Ovid's epistles joineth together quality and natural impulsion, saying, "A uiene et Cupido credatur redita Virgo," which is in English, "Think you that she that was carried away of a young man and hot in love was restored again a maid?" Tully in the Oracion for Milo, among the other arguments, bringeth in one against Claudius by natural impulsion of hatred, showing that Claudius had cause to hate Milo first, for he was one of them that labored for the same Tully's revocation from exile, which Tully Claudius maliciously hated. Again, that Milo oppressed many of his spurious purposes. And finally, because the said Milo accused him and cast him afore the Senate and people of Rome. Ratiocination is that cometh of hope of any commodity, or to issue any discommodity. As Tully argueth in his Oracion for Milo against Claudius, by ratiocination, to prove that it was he that laid wait for Milo on this manner. It is sufficient to prove that this cruel and wicked beast had a great cause to slay Milo, if he would bring his matters that he went about to pass, and great hope, if he were once gone, not to be letted in his pretenced malice. After ratiocination followeth comprobation, to show that no man else had any cause to go thereabout, save he whom we accuse, nor no profit could come to no man thereof, save to him. These are the ways whereby an orator shall prove that the person accused had will to the thing that is laid to his charge. To prove that he might do it, he must go to the circumstance of the cause, as that he had leisure enough thereto, and place convenient, and strength withal. Also you shall prove it by signs, which are of marvellous efficacy on this behalf. Wherefore here must be noted that signs, by other words or deeds that either did go before, or else follow the deed. As Tully in his Oracion now often alleged argueth against Claudius by signs going afore the deed, as that Claudius said 3 days afore Milo was slain, that he should not live 3 days to an end. And that he went out of the city a little afore Milo rode forth with a great company of strong and mischievous knaves. Signs following are as if after the deed was done he fled, or else when it was laid to his charge he blushed or waxed pale, or stuttered and could not well speak. The contrary places, as I said afore, belong to the defender, save that in signs he must use 2 things, absolution and invention. Absolution is whereby the defender showeth that it is lawful for him to do that what the adversary bringeth in for a sign of his malice. Example. A man is found covering of a dead body, and thereupon accused of murder. He may answer that it is lawful to do so for the preservation of his body from ravens and other that would devour him, till time he had warned people to fetch and bury him. Invention is whereby we show that the sign which is brought against us maketh for us. As I would not have tarried to cover him if I had done the deed myself, but have fled and shrunk aside into some other way for fear of taking. Of the conclusion. The conclusion is, as I have said afore, in brief repeating of the effect of our reasons, and in moving the judges to our purpose. The accuser to punish the person accused, the defender to move him to pity. Of the state judicial, and the handling thereof. As state conjectural cometh out of this question, who did the deed, so when there is no doubt but that the deed is done, and who did it, many times controversy is had whether it hath been done lawfully or not. And this state is negocial or juridical, which containeth the right or wrong of the deed. As in the Oracion of Tully for Milo, the state is juridical, for open it was that Claudius was slain, and that Milo slew him. But whether he killed him lawfully or not is the controversy and state of the cause, as I have afore declared. The preamble and narration as afore. The confirmation hath certain places appropriate thereto, but here must be marked that state negocial is double, absolute, and assumptive. State negocial absolute is when the thing that is in controversy is absolutely defended to be lawfully done. As in the oration of Tully for Milo, the deed is stiffly affirmed to be lawfully done in slaying Claudius, saying that Milo did it in his own defense, for the law permitted to repel violence violently. The places of confirmation in state absolute are these: nature, law, custom, equity or reason, judgment, necessity, bargain or covenant. Of the which places Tully in his oration for Milo bringeth in the more part together in a cluster on this manner. If reason hath prescribed this to learned and wise men, and necessity hath driven it into barbers and rude folk, and custom keepeth it among all nations, and nature hath planted it in brute beasts, that every creature should defend himself, and save his life and his body from all violence by any manner of succour, what means or way soever it were, you cannot judge this deed evil done, except you will judge that when men meet with thieves or murderers, they must either be slain by the weapons of such unthrifty and malicious persons, either else perish by your sentence given in judgment upon them. State assumptive is when the defense is feeble of itself, but yet it may be holpen by some other thing added to it. And the places longing to this state are granting of the fault, removing of the fault, or as we say in our tongue, laying it from us to another, and translating of the fault. Granting of the fault is when the person accused denieth not the deed, but yet he desireth to be forgiven, and it hath two places more annexed to it, purgation and deprecation. Purgation is when he saith he did it not maliciously, but by ignorance or mishap, which place Cato useth erroneously in Sallust thus: My mind is that ye have pity with you, for they that have done amiss be but very young men, and desire of honour drove them to it. Deprecation is when we have none excuse, but we call upon the justice's mercy. The handling whereof Tully writeth in his book of Invention thus: He that laboureth to be forgiven of his fault must rehearse, if he can, some benefits of his done aforetime, and show that they be far greater in their nature than is the crime that he hath committed, so that howbeit he hath done greatly amiss, yet the goodes of his fore merits are far bigger, and so may well oppresse this one fault. Next after that it behoveth him to have refuge to the merits of his elders, if there be any, and to open them. That done, he must return to the place of purgation, and show that he did not the deed for any hate or malice, but either by foolishness or else by the entitlement of some other, or for some provable cause. And then promise faithfully that this fault shall teach him to beware from thenceforth, and also that their benefits that forgive him shall bind him assuredly never to do so more, but perpetually to abhor any such offence, and with that to show some great hope, once to make them a great recompense and pleasure therefore again. After this, let him, if he can, declare some kindred between them and him, or friendship of his elders, and amplify the greatness of his service and good heart toward them, if it shall please them to forgive this fault, and add the nobility of them that would fain have him delivered. And then he shall soberly declare his own virtues, and such things as be in him pertaining to honesty and praise, that he may by these means seem rather worthy to be advanced in honour for his good qualities, than to be punished for his fall. This done, let him rehearse some other that have been forgiven greater faults than this is. It shall also greatly avail if he can show that he hath in time afore been in authority and bare a rule over other, in the which he was never but gentle and glad to forgive them that had offended underneath him. And then let him extenuate his own fault, and show that there followed not so great damage thereof, and that but little profit or honesty will follow of his punishment. and finally then by commonplaces to move the judge to mercy and pity upon him. The adversary must, as I have shewed afore, use for his purpose contrary places. Some rhetoricians put no more places of deprecation than only this that is here left rehearsed of Tully, that is, to do our best to move the justice to mercy and pity. Remotion of the fault is when we put it from us and lay it to another. Example. The Venetians have commanded certain to go in ambassade to England, and thereupon appointed them what they shall have to bear their charges, which money assigned, they cannot get of the treasurer. At the day appointed they go not, whereupon they are accused to the Senate. Here they must lay the fault from them to the treasurer, which dispatched them not according as it was ordered that he should. Translation of the fault is when he that confesseth his fault saith that he did it, moved by the indignation of the malicious deed of another. Example. King Agamemnon, which was chief captain of the Greeks at the siege of Troy, when he came home, was slain of Aegisthus by the treason of Clytemnestra, his own wife. Which murder his son Orestes seeing, when he came to man's state, revenged his father's death on his mother, and slew her, whereupon he was accused. Here Orestes cannot deny but he slew his mother, but he layeth for him that his mother's abominable injury constrained him thereto, because she slew his father. And this is the handling of confirmation in state assumptive. The conclusions in these orations are like to the conclusions of other. Of state legitim, and the handling thereof. State legitim is when the controversy standeth in definition, or contrary laws, or doubtful writings, or ratiocination, or translation. Of definition. Definition, as Tully writeth, is when in any writing is some word put, the signification whereof requireth exposition. Example. A law may be made that such as forsake a ship in time of tempest should lease their right that they have, either in the ship or in any goods within the same vessel, and that they shall have the ship and the goods that abide still in her. It chanced two men to be in a little crere, of which vessel the one man was both owner and governor, and the other possessor of the goods. And as they were in the main sea, they espied one that was swimming in the sea, and as well as he could holding up his hands to them for succour. Whereupon they, being moved with pity, made towards him, and took him up. Within a little after arose a great tempest upon them, and put them in such jeopardy that the owner of the ship, which was also governor, leapt out of the ship into the ship-boat, and with the rope that tied the boat to the ship, he governed the ship as well as he could. The merchant that was within the ship, for great despair of the loss of his goods, willing to slay himself, thrust himself in with his own sword. But as it chanced, the wound was neither mortal nor very grievous. But notwithstanding for that time he was unable to do any good in helping the ship against the impetuousness of the storm. The third man, which not long afore had suffered shipwreck, got him to the stern, and holp the vessel the best that lay in him. At length the storm ceased, and the ship came safe into the haven, boat and all. He that was hurt, by help of chirurgeons, recovered anon. Now every of these three challenged the ship and goods as his own. Here every man layeth for him the law above rehearsed, and all their controversy lieth in the expounding of three words, abiding in the ship, and forsaking the ship, and what we shall in such case call the ship, whether the boat as part of the ship, or else the ship itself alone. The handling hereof is, first, in a few words, and plain to declare the signification of the word to our purpose, and after such manner as may seem reasonable to the audience. Next, after such exposition to declare and prove the said exposition true, with as many arguments as we can. Thirdly, to join our deed with the exposition, and to shew that we only did observe the very intent of the law. Then to refel the exposition of our adversaries, and to show that their exposition is contrary to reason and equity, and that no wise man will so take the law as they expound it, and that the exposition is neither honest nor profitable, and to constere their exposition with ours, and to show that ours containeth the verity and theirs is false. Ours honest, reasonable, and profitable, theirs clean contrary. And then search out like examples, either of greater matters or of less, or else of egal matters, and to manifest by them that our mind is the very truth. Contrary laws are where the one seemeth evidently to contrary the other, as if a law were that he whom his father hath forsaken for his son shall in no wise have any portion of his father's goods. And another law, that whosoever in time of tempest abideth in the ship shall have the ship and goods. Then pose that one which was of his father so abject and denied for his child was in a ship of his father's in time of sore weather. And when all other for fear of leasing themselves forsook the ship and got them into the boat, he only abode, and by chance was safe brought into the haven. Whereupon he challengeth the vessel for his, whereas the party defendant will lay against him that he is abdicate or forsaken of his father, and so cannot by the law have any part of his goods. Here must he say again for him that this law alleged doth all only private from their father's goods, such as be abdicate, and yet would challenge a part as his children, but that he doth not so, but requireth to have the ship not as a son to his father, but as any other stranger might, saying the law giveth him the ship that abideth in her in time of necessity. And so the handling of this state, either to deny one of the laws, and show that it hath been afore annulled, or else to expound it after the sense that is meet to our purpose. Doubtful writing is where either the mind of the author seemeth to be contrary to that that is written, which some call writing and sentence, or else it is when the words may be expounded diverse ways. Example of the first. Men say it is a law in Calais that no stranger may go upon the town walls on pain of death. Now then pose that in time of war, the town being hard besieged, an alien dwelling in the town getteth him to the walls among the soldiers, and doth more good than any one man again. Now after the siege ended, he is accused of transgressing of the law, which in words is evidently against him. But here the defendant must declare the writer's mind by circumstances, what stranger he did forbid, and what time, and after what manner, and in what intent he would not have any stranger to come on the walls, and in what intent his mind might be understanden to suffer an alien to go upon the walls. And here must the effect of the stranger's will be declared, that he went up to defend the town, to put back their enemies. And thereto he must say that the maker was not so undiscreet and unreasonable, that he would have no manner of exception which should be to the wealth, profit, or preservation of the town. For he that will not have the law to be understanden according to equity, good manner, and nature, intendeth to prove the maker thereof either an unjust man, or foolish, or envious. The accuser contrarily shall praise the maker of the law for his great wisdom, for his plain writing without any manner of ambiguity, that no stranger should presume to go upon the walls, and rehearse the law word for word, and then show some reasonable cause that moved the maker of the law, that he would utterly that no stranger should ascend the walls, etc. Example of the second. A man in his testament giveth to 2 young daughters that he hath 200 sheep, to be delivered at the day of their marriage, on this manner: I will that mine executors shall give to my daughters at the time of their marriage every of them 100 sheep, such as they will. At the time of marriage they demand their cattle, which the executors deliver not of such sort as the maidens would. Whereupon the controversy ariseth. For the executors say they are bound to deliver to every of them 100 sheep, such as they that be the executors will. Now here standeth the doubt, to whom we shall refer this word they, to the daughters or to the executors. The maidens say nay thereto, but that it was their father's mind that they should have every of them 100 sheep, such as they that be the daughters will. The handling of doubtful writing is to show if it be possible that it is not written doubtfully by cause, it is the common manner to take it after as we say, and that it may soon be known by such words as partly go before that clause, and partly follow, and that there be few words, but if they be considered so alone, they may anon be taken doubtfully. And first we shall show, if we can, that it is not doubtfully written, for there is no reasonable man, but he will take it as we say. Then shall we declare by that goeth afore and followeth, that it is clearly even as we say, and that if we consider the words of themselves, they will seem to be of ambiguity. But seeing they may by the rest of the writing be evident enough, they ought not to be taken as doubtful. And then show that if it had been his mind that made the writing to have it taken as the adversary saith, he needed not to have written any such words. As in the example now put, the maidens may say that if it had been their father's mind that the executors should have delivered such sheep as it had pleased them to deliver, he needed not to have added these words, such as they will. For if they had not been put, it would not have been doubt but that the executors delivering every of them 100 sheep, whatsoever they were, had fulfilled the will, and could have been no further compelled. Wherefore, if his mind was as they say, it was a great folly to put in those words which made a plain matter to be unplain. And then finally show it is more honest and convenient to expound it as we say than as our adversaries do. Ratiocination is when the matter is in controversy, whereupon no law is decreed, but yet the judgment thereof may be found out by laws made upon matters some deal resembling thereunto. As in Rome was this law made, that if any person were distraught, his possessions and goods should come to the hands of his next kin. And another law, what any householder doth ordain and make as concerning his household and other goods, it is approbate and confirmed by the law. And another law, if any householder die intestate, his money and other goods shall remain to his next kin. It chanced one to kill his own mother, whereupon he was taken and condemned to death. But while he lay in prison, certain of his familiar friends came thither to him, and brought with them a clerk to write his testament, which he there made, and made such executors as it pleased him. After his death, his kinsmen challenge his goods. His executors say them nay, whereupon ariseth controversy afore the justice. There is no law made upon this case, whether he that hath killed his mother may make any testament or not, but it may be reasoned on both parties by the laws above rehearsed. The kinsmen shall allege the law made for them that be out of their minds, presupposing him not to be in much other case, or else he would not have done the deed. The contrary part shall allege the other law, and show that it was none alienation of mind, but some other cause that moved him to it, and that he hath had his punishment therefore, which he should not have suffered of convenient if he had been beside himself. Translation is which the lawyers call exception, as if a person accused plead that it is not lawful for the t'other to accuse him, or that the judge can be no judge in that cause, etc. End of section 9. Section 10 of the Art or Craft of Rhetoric. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Amelia Chesley. The Art or Craft of Rhetoric by Leonard COX. The conclusion of the author. These are, my special and singular good Lord, which I have purposed to write as touching the chief point of the 4 that I said in the beginning to long to a rhetorician, and which is more difficulty than the other three, so that it once had, there is no very great mastery to come by the residue. Notwithstanding, if I see that it be first acceptable to your good lordship, in whom next God and his holy saints I have put my chief confidence and trust, and after that if I find that it seem to the readers a thing worthy to be looked on, and that your lordship and they think not my labour taken in vain, I will essay myself in the other parts, and so make and accomplish the whole work. But now I have followed the fashion of Tully, who made a several work of invention. And though many things be left out of this treatise that ought to be spoken of, yet I suppose that this shall be sufficient for an introduction to young beginners, for whom all only this book is made. For other that been entreated already shall have little need of my labour, but they may seek more meeter things for their purpose, either in Hermogenes among the Greeks, or else Tully or Tripsonce among the Latins. And to them that be young beginners nothing can be too plain or too short, wherefore Horace in his book of the Crafte of Poetry saith: Quicquid praecipies esto brevis, ut cito dicta percepiant animi dociles, teniantque fideles. Whatsoever ye will teach, saith he, be brief therein, that the minds of the hearers or readers may the easier perceive it, and the better bear it away. And the Emperor Justinian saith in the first book of his Institutions, in the paragraph of justice and right, that over great curiosity in the first principles make him that is studious of the faculty either to forsake it, or else to attain it with very great and tedious labour, and many times with great despair to come to the end of his purpose. And for this cause I have been far less curious than I would else have been, and also a great deal the shorter. If this my labour may please your lordship, it is the thing that I do in it most desire. But if it seem both to you and other a thing that is very rude, and scant worth the looking on, yet Aristotle's words shall comfort me, who saith that men be not only bound to good authors, but also to bad, because that by their writing they have provoked cunninger men to take the matter on hand, which would else peradventure have held their peace. Truly, there is nothing that I would be more gladder of than if it might chance me on this manner to cause them that be of much better learning and exercise in this art than I, of whom I am very sure that this realm hath great plenty, that they would set the pen to paper and by their industry obscure my rude ignorance. In the mean space I beseech the readers, if they find anything therein that may do them any profit, that they give the thanks to God and to your lordship, and that they will of their charity pray unto the blessed Trinity for me, that when it shall please the Godhead to take me from this transitory life, I may by his mercy be of the number of his elect to perpetual salvation. Imprinted at London, in Fleet Street, by me, Robert Redman, dwelling at the sign of the George, cum privilegio. End of section 10. End of the Art or Craft of Rhetoric by Leonard COX.